We're calling to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Santa Barbara for February 12th, 2009. Welcome, everyone. I'll begin by turning to my little hot sheet. There. Would like to know if anyone needs to make a comment. You may make a comment up to 2 minutes on any subject at all. Just please give that madly writing staff person over there a green slip, and you can have the floor. Can't be on today's agenda. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close that. Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't start with the roll. I was too excited from the last meeting. Ms. Feliciano, please.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Here.
Commissioner Jacobs. Commissioner Jostes.
Hello. Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
And Chair Larson.
Here. Okay, and I'll also ask that you please turn off all your electronic devices, texting, earpieces. We can't use them. You can't either. So the day you see us open a laptop up here, you can get real excited. We don't talk to each other up here, so we don't expect you to be texting downstairs or your office or something while you're here. We're going to try and be very succinct today because we've already been in meetings since 9:30, and I know some blood sugar's been adjusted, but some of us might be grouchy. So we're going to try and get through this real quickly. If you have, the last time this item was heard, people were standing up and yielding time and all that jazz. We're going to have a lot more order today, please. So if you're yielding time, again, Mr. Cato is writing madly over here in the corner, and you can yield to Mr. Cato, and he will give the message to me, and that way we can conduct the meeting in good order. So I know you're still writing, Dan. Could you, any announcements or appeals?
No, thank you.
Okay. And then we open and close public comment right away on non-agenda items. So that being done, we'll start with, this is the El Encanto. And so we'll start with the staff presentation. Ms. Kennedy, are you ready?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like you said, there's a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to give the staff presentation, hitting a number of highlights, going over a little bit of a history, but not going into complete detail about everything. And we're here for questions, if you have questions later. This project is the El Encanto Hotel Revised Master Plan. We look at it, or staff looks at this as basically three phases. In 2004, a master plan was approved. After that, some other changes were approved as well, and I'll go through those. 2 cottages, 4, 12, 11, and the main building. And then the third phase is the proposed revised master plan. Here's an aerial of the pre-2004 master plan, the way the project site looked at that time when they came forward with their master plan. This gives you the general areas that were involved in the master plan proposal. This area is the tennis court and parking that was removed, proposed to be removed and approved. A new parking lot area here. In the blue, these are the 3 historic buildings that were to be relocated as part of this proposal, and then changes in the parking lot area in the northwest corner. Some changes to the main building and the pool were also included. And then we have a photo simulation of what the project would look like if the applicant went forward with the complete 2004 master plan. And of course, this is a photo simulation. This was an enlarged parking area to look like this. Enlarged parking area here in the northwest corner. These blue ones, again, are the historic buildings that actually have been moved. So they've been relocated from here over to this area. And then the 5 new buildings that were approved, 28, 27, 26, 25, and 29. And then the main building, some changes were approved there, and as well to the pool. As you know, this is a 6.7 acre site. It consists of 29 buildings. And since the 2004 master plan, some changes were made. And basically this is what consists of those changes. Cottage 4 was requested to be demolished because there were structural problems. It was not one of the historic buildings, and it went through the process of HLC review and a historic structures report, and that was approved. Same with Cottage 12 was allowed to be demolished and reconstructed, and also not a historic building. Cottage 11 was allowed to have a minor addition in the back due to some structural problems, and that was approved. And then some other changes to the main building that I'll go through. Here I'll just show you where Cottage 4 is, Cottage 12, and then Cottage 11. In regard to the main building, the 2004 master plan included a new entry, new loading dock area, raising the lower level of the dining deck, and then an expansion of the hotel consisting of 2,251 square feet, and that would include a new spa, fitness center, and administrative offices within that square footage. The applicant presented information regarding the structural problems that were associated with the main building when they were beginning to look at making those changes. Requested a demolition permit and went forward doing that. And some of the changes as a result of the new building being constructed are listed here. There was an increase in the basement size of 953 square feet, an increase in height of 2 feet. There's also some concern that the main building was increased in height by maybe 8 feet, and I think what people may be looking at is that there's some mechanical screening that was approved on the second story roof, and that does extend the second story. I'm not sure how many feet exactly, but to screen that mechanical equipment. And then also the elimination of the fitness center that was approved on the first floor of the main building. The net result is that there are 3,204 square feet in the main building, more than were in the original building. Now getting to the revised master plan, basically consists of 5 components. In the northwest corner, the northeast corner, cottages 27, 28, swimming pool and fitness center, and then a small portion by the entry and service area of the main building. I'm going to go through these just briefly and not a lot of detail, but to compare what was approved in 2004 compared to what is being proposed today. So here's the northwest corner. Again, this is the aerial of the pre-2004 approval. You can see that the historic structures are still here in this photo. So this is the northwest corner that we're talking about. The approval consisted of the relocation of those historic cottages and the construction of a new surface valet parking lot consisting of 52 spaces. Today's proposal consists of a utility distribution facility, a surface valet parking lot with 43 spaces, and an underground operations facility. In the northeast corner, over here, the approval consisted of the renovation of those 3 existing cottages and the enlargement of the surface parking lot to have 33 spaces. The proposal today includes the demolition of the existing cottages, the construction of 5 new cottages, which is called the Mission Village area, and an underground parking garage consisting of 51 spaces. In the 2004 approval, the cottages 27, 28 were included. They were eliminated after that with the transfer of that associated square footage to the basement main building. As part of this project, the 2 new cottages, which are substantially what they were before, are being asked to be approved. In the swimming pool and fitness center area, the original approval was for a remodel of the pool and deck, and there was a new fitness center proposed in the main building. The proposal now is to relocate the pool further to the east and to move the fitness center underneath the pool and deck, totaling 2,775 square feet. There was a new loading dock and service entry approved at the main building area. As part of this project, there's a proposal to widen the driveway somewhat, a new trash enclosure, screening gate, retaining wall, and also the relocation of 4 of the parking spaces in that area. The proposed revised master plan also want to point out that there's no increase in the number of guest rooms, no increase in the number of employees, although there is an increase in the number of parking spaces from 97 to 100. In regard to design review, the 2004 master plan and the subsequent approvals that I mentioned were required to go before HLC for all design approvals, preliminary and final. Each building or group of buildings was required to be evaluated in a historic structures sites report. The HLC conducted numerous reviews as required and granted final approvals for all those projects and accepted each historic structures and sites report. For the proposed revised master plan, the HLC accepted a historic structures sites report that evaluated the revised master plan in relation to the entire site and all previous approvals. In addition, the HLC provided positive comments on the design of the revised master plan. And I've included a number of the HLC minutes in your staff report. Not every single meeting, but the most relevant ones. In regard to environmental review, a draft initial study and mitigated negative declaration was prepared. A public review period was held from December to January 15th, 2009. We had a hearing, as you know, on January 8th to accept comments on the draft mitigated negative declaration. We've received 8 comment letters, which are also included in your staff report, and staff has responded to those comments, and they're also attached to the environmental document. Potential environmental impacts are considered in relation to an environmental baseline that includes the existing physical environment, the development approved in 2004, and the approvals that followed. The final mitigated negative declaration considers cumulative impacts of the revised master plan in combination with those previous approvals. In regard to adequacy of review, the project, an EIR is required when substantial evidence is presented that a project could potentially result in significant environmental impacts. The adequacy of the environmental document is determined by what is reasonable, and CEQA does not require a lead agency to conduct every test or study that could be brought to our attention. For this project, no substantial evidence has been presented that there is a potential for the project, as mitigated, to result in project-specific or cumulative impacts exceeding the significant thresholds accepted by the city. Therefore, a mitigated negative declaration is the appropriate environmental document. I'd like to go over just a couple of the issues from the environmental document itself. Noise was provided in a number of the comment letters that we received. An acoustical analysis and follow-up addendum was prepared for the proposed project and has been accepted by city staff. The report analyzed potential noise impacts to the surrounding residential areas of the following components. It included the utility distribution facility in the northwest corner, also the surface parking lot in the northwest corner, the Mission Village and underground garage in the northeast corner, traffic noise from the valley parking lots, and traffic associated with the 9 additional rooms that were approved previously but are not yet under construction. The report concluded that the operational noise levels associated with the revised master plan would be well below the city's acceptable thresholds. Therefore, long-term noise impacts would be less than significant. In regard to historic resources, an addendum to the Historic Structures Sites Report was prepared that evaluated all components of the revised master plan, including landscaping, in relation to the entire site and neighboring sites, and was accepted by the HLC. In that report, it was identified a group of 5 eucalyptus trees located along the Alvarado Place in the northwest corner. These were determined to be historically significant, not as individual trees themselves, but as a group. The report stated that the removal of the trees, for reasons other than health and safety concerns, would constitute a significant impact to historic resources. And this is the report that the HLC approved, and we put together a mitigation measure. And I've just provided an excerpt here from that. Trees shall be retained unless a city-approved arborist determines that their preservation is not feasible or recommended due to their existing condition relative to life expectancy, disease, or safety reasons. Also, the fire department has looked at this and is requiring that all eucalyptus trees be trimmed and maintained for fire safety. In regard to aesthetics, the determination was made that the project would not substantially negatively impact the aesthetics of the site or public and community views. I'd like to go over briefly the square footage amounts and where we get to the number that we have today. Previously, 3 parcels were merged, and from that, the project site qualified for 3,000 square feet per parcel. They qualified for the vacant parcel square footage and demolition credit for a laundry building that had burned down. And here are the numbers for each of those. In 2004, the master plan included 8,010 square feet, so that's been subtracted out. Made an adjustment in regard to the cottages of 2728, and we can go into that if you'd like. That adds another additional 883 back into the amount that's available. So the site currently has 7,021 square feet of available non-residential square footage. The project, though, would require 17,021. Therefore, the applicant has requested approval of a transfer of existing development rights for that remaining 10,000 square feet. The project includes a number of modifications, and other applications are required. Modifications that I'm not going to go through specifically, but they are to encroach into the front yard setback along Mission Ridge Road and Alvarado Place, encroachments into the interior setback along the eastern property line, and a modification to allow less than the required distance between the new buildings. For any development in the RH zone, a development plan approval is required. Also, development plan approval is required to allocate that 7,021 square feet of non-residential square footage, and a transfer of existing development rights for the 10,000 square feet being requested. Staff is in support of the proposed project, including the modifications, and recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the mitigated negative declaration, approve the project, making the findings outlined in the staff report, and subject to the attached conditions of approval. That concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kennedy. And how about a presentation from Ms. Elledge, the applicants? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Larson and Planning Commissioners. My name is Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting Services. We're very proud to be representing this application before you today. I happen to be a Riviera resident and have spent several wedding anniversaries and birthday dinners at the El Encanto Hotel. I have a keen interest in it getting to reopen as soon as possible, as I know many members of the community do as well. Our office has had the distinct honor, I think, of in the last 10 years representing the 4 most significant historic hotels in the Santa Barbara area. It seems that they were all built around the same time, and they've had a need to upgrade all around the same time. And these properties all have the same challenge. They all are significant from a historic resource standpoint. They need to keep up to date with the kinds of amenities that guests expect at resort hotels such as these. And they have to balance the need to upgrade their site and their amenities and their facilities with the sensitivity to the historic resources that are on site, historic tradition of the site, and the fact that they all exist with residential neighborhoods surrounding them. So the challenge is to deliver to you a project that properly balances all of those things, which we believe we have done. And we're going to present that to you today. Trish Allen from my office, a senior planner with our office, has managed this project, and she'll be making the presentation. The rest of the team is here if needed for questions, but we'll get on with it, and we will try to make very good use of your time, be efficient in our presentation.
Thank you. Okay, Trish, we'll see how fast you can talk, because you get about
the timer's
14
working.
minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Larson and members of the Commission. Similar to staff approach, I do not intend to go over in detail all the project components. I think we're all very familiar with them. Initially, I want to convey the Orient Express Hotel commitment to complete this project, to get it to completion and open as soon as possible. We have had a change in our construction schedule, as explained to you during the August hearing when we requested a separate phase for the utility distribution facility. We were looking at that to keep on track with our schedule. As a result, with the current processing and the inability to phase that out, we've had to push back our schedule and employ a construction slowdown. Up on the slide right now, I have the aerial. We're all familiar with the site. I'm sorry, I didn't set my pointer. Well, I'll work on it. Surrounded by Riviera Campus to the west and the residential neighborhoods to the north and the east, Orput Park to the south. My first slide is the 1990 ALTA survey that was prepared, and I wanted to highlight a couple of structures and talk about just land uses, historic little h land uses. In the very northwest corner in the green shaded structure was the Cottage 19, the historic structure that was previously located there. A little further to the east is the old laundry building that staff just referred to in their report. And even further east is the old maintenance area, water pump structure. Thank you. Now I have two things to manage up here. What I did is I superimposed the 30-foot setback to show you that there were hotel operational structures located in this portion of the property for a period of time, making the point that what we're proposing with the revised master plan, I feel, is very consistent with these land uses that previously existed. I actually was made aware of this relatively recently. After the laundry structure was destroyed in a fire in 1998, the laundry facilities were relocated into Cottage 19 and operated there for a number of years. These are some old photos that were provided. This is the structure previous to it becoming the laundry. It's hard to see in here. There is a vehicle parked in here, a maintenance garage. There's a gas pump located here. This is the structure that I showed in this slide right there. A water pump. It says pump house and tank. Also some photos showing the laundry functions that occurred within Cottage 19 after the laundry structure burnt down. This is a view of 19 looking from Alvarado Place before the cottage was relocated. What I have up on the screen is just a site plan that shows the perimeter of the property and the existing encroachments, not demonstrating the non-conforming aspects of the property relative to setbacks. So this is just the previous condition. Actually, it's showing the 2004 approved site plan, but really highlighting the existing structures that encroach into the setback area. This shows the 52-space parking lot that was approved in 2004 relative to the setbacks. And what I wanted to point out here is compared to the proposed plan where the parking lot is located now. We have the setbacks shown here as well. The area of encroachment of the utility distribution facility right here and the parking lot. And then these are all existing in this area. Mission Village, cottages 27 and 28. These two cottages exist and are located in the setback area. It's a little bit hard to see in here. This is a photo simulation looking at the entry towards the parking lot with the perimeter wall that we're proposing. And the utility distribution facility just barely visible back here. It's just a little bit dark. I don't know if the more lights off would help. There's the structure in the back. Now this is without the vegetation proposed in the tree wells within the facility in the parking lot. I'm sorry, that's with the vegetation, and that's without the vegetation. In the background, you're seeing Cottage 29, which was part of the 2004 approval, and Cottage 16 further back. So we did include that in the photo simulation. Another view from the corner, the utility distribution facility located here. Again, the perimeter walls that are screening the vehicles parked on the depressed parking surface, and the main building in the background. There's with the additional trees added in the tree wells that are proposed. Some questions came up at the site visit about the encroachments and distance between buildings. Really, what we worked with the Landmarks Commission in the design of this project is to establish an appropriate density that was in keeping with the historic development pattern of the site. And then we get into the technical aspects of needing appropriate distance between buildings in order to have pathways that also meet ADA accessibility and to provide sufficient areas of landscaping. And I just want to show you, we've been working on modeling the proposed Mission Village area. Thank you. We had these up at the site visit this week. Oops. Sorry about that. Here's the entry driveway coming into the parking podium structure with Mission Village proposed on top. Gives an idea of the different relationships and spatial relationships that we were working through the Historic Landmarks Commission. This is a south-facing view. This is Cottage 30, the one-story structure that we had shown you with story poles this week. And you can see Mission Ridge Road shown right here. What's hard to capture in this view, maybe, but what we could see at the site is the topography, the pretty steep slope happening, the change in elevation from Mission Ridge Road down to the site where the proposed buildings are located, providing what I think of as a natural buffer between the street and the property. I'm done with those visuals. Thanks, Danny. I want to move on to a little bit more explanation of the utility distribution facility. In the 2004 approval, there was no utility distribution facility proposed. In fact, at the time, the project team and this owner presumed that they would be pursuing a traditional heating and cooling system, meaning installing individual pieces of mechanical equipment throughout the site. So the team came up with some ideas, went to Historic Landmarks Commission, and proposed exterior mechanical equipment, and they were turned away by the Historic Landmarks Commission. That approach and the traditional approach was found to be unacceptable, and the Historic Landmarks Commission directed the design team to explore alternatives to simply heat and cool the buildings on the property where they previously were not. When the design team was challenged by Historic Landmarks Commission, then also by the owner, there were certain goals that were laid out that the owners wanted to achieve. Feasibility is a broad term, and I think foremost in terms of the feasibility of providing mechanical equipment to the site, first you have to get through the Historic Landmarks Commission and find something that will be historically compatible with the site. And of course you have to consider the logistics of the infrastructure. How do we tie into the city system and make this system work? And Orient Express is very conscious of sustainable systems and energy efficiency. So they also wanted to propose something that would be energy efficient. And of course, compatible with the site, not just historically, but with having a really nice atmosphere on the property and considering the residential neighborhood. So this was a work in progress after the 2004 approval and evolved. And what the mechanical engineer team came up with was a non-traditional system, a water condensed loop system proposed for the site. I'm watching the clock.
Me too.
This system, what it does is it distributes power, the power source or the energy might be the easiest way of looking at it. So what you have is the utility distribution facility located in this corner, and then individual pieces of mechanical equipment that are smaller pieces because they're in this distributed system, and they are hidden and concealed and sound attenuated underneath the cottages themselves. So you're not seeing any physical change to the property to accommodate the heating and cooling. Now, as I understand it, if you consider the system as a whole, and that's 100% energy. And I'm sorry, this is the simplest diagram that I can get out of the team. But what we have over here is a diagram, a flow diagram showing the area that's the utility distribution facility, the flow lines serving the property, and then the individual cottages here. And what's compelling about this is that the utility distribution facility is 20% of the energy consumption of the system. The cottages themselves, with their individual condensing units, are 70% of that energy consumption. And then there's a fan coil unit that is in the attic space, and that's another 10% of the energy consumption. So my point is that we're not, the project does not propose to put all the powerhouse, all the noise, all the mechanical systems localized in one area of the property. What this does is it distributes it throughout so that within each cottage you can have a greater ability to achieve sound attenuation. Now, let me go back to the site plan. What we've done, and I have sections, I have all the drawings that are in your plan set in the PowerPoint, but that would take so much time, and we'll come back to any questions you have during Q&A, certainly. This location facilitated this type of system because of the topography, because of the proximity of the city infrastructure to tie into the city utilities out here in the street. And what the team was challenged with and came up in the design is to bury this mechanical equipment ranging from 17 to 22 feet below ground. What that allows is a lot of baffling silencers. There are elements that do come above grade simply for air ventilation. So what this facility has done is allowed a lot of flexibility with the individual cottages. And I wanted to show this quick study that was part of a selling point to the owner in terms of this system. So the system we're proposing is, there's a lot of terminology here that is beyond me, but the systems themselves that are within the cottages are called the VRVs. And so that is shown in this maroon color in terms of how much energy consumption as compared to a traditional air cooling and heating system. And you can see how much better this system does in terms of heating and cooling than a traditional air cooling system, this water condense system. We'll have some more questions about that, and so I will move on from that. And I just wanted to touch on the TEDR very quickly. Staff did go over this in terms of the site development potential, and some questions were raised at the site visit about the transfer of floor area, where our project requests 10,000 square feet to be transferred to the site. Now, the site itself had just over 7,000 square feet of its own site development potential. So where is the 10,000 square feet needed? Well, honestly, in the main building, the previous approval did not accommodate sufficient hotel operational areas, physical areas, in order to operate this type of 5-star resort hotel. What this owner, in order to meet this owner's needs and to really achieve a hotel that provides the type of guest amenities that folks expect today, there are needs for storage space, other facilities that are simply hotel operational support needs. So that 10,000 square feet, if we look at the breakdown, I was playing with the numbers because the operations facility, back of house,
Hope you're within about a minute of
I am.
wrapping up. Thank you.
is almost 9,000 square feet. Well, that's about the amount that we're asking to be transferred. So really, this transfer is to support the function of the hotel, and the way in which we felt it best, so it would not impact the site, the historic character of the site, or the neighborhood, is to put it underground. So it's a needed amenity. It doesn't impact mass, bulk, and scale or density on the site or historic resources. And as staff already stated, this does not result in an increase of employees. We're not adding the floor area isn't needed for guest rooms and things like that, but just simply needed storage space. Now, I know you have a lot of questions. We'll get to those. And I wanted to mention that I'm aware of a lot of folks that wanted to come out today and make some public comment beyond, who are here in the room. And I knew that a lot of folks weren't able to be here and did submit quite a few letters. I'm sure you've received them. I saw some of the emails and letters of support as well. So I just wanted to make note of that. And we are here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll open public comment. I'd like to start. There are two members from HLC here. And so we'll have Don Sharp followed by Fermina Murray, please.
Thank you. I'm Don Sharp, Vice Chair of HLC. This project has been going on for at least 5 years, and the master plan was approved in 2004 when I was between two-year term of being on the Landmarks Commission. So I was not personally a part of the original approval, and came in back on HLC and have been dealing with the fragmentation that we have been seeing through this entire process. I can't tell you, I'm sure staff can, I cannot tell you how many times we have seen little bits and pieces of this. And so the first comment that HLC had when we last saw this on December 10th was, there is concern with respect to the strategy of reviewing this project in sections without a complete context to differentiate between what was previously approved and the proposed changes. Second, the entry is an important element of the entire historical aspect of this building site. Explore alternatives with respect to the entry's narrowness, meaning existing narrowness, and preserving some feel for the rustic, small-scale aspect of this entry. I believe you will note on the site plan that the opening to Alvarado Street is roughly going to double. They're going to have the inn, and then they're going to have another driveway south of the main eucalyptus tree that is alongside the entry now for deliveries and so forth. We asked that they explore getting this as narrow as possible with consideration to what is primarily a residential area, certainly above there. 4, the plant palette should follow drought-tolerant conservation guidelines. Explore other options such as a coast live oak. 5, reinvestigate the bed planting in the entry. 6, the relocation of the employee parking is of concern as it affects other aspects of the proposed plan. And 7, the north wall trash enclosure should be of sandstone. I believe you all received a letter from Robert Adams, who is a landscape architect on the HLC, and I must say that he wrote this couldn't be here today, wrote this after our site visit yesterday, and these are his personal comments, not a part of any official HLC minutes or meeting, but just strictly as a landscape architect. And with that, any questions? I would like to have Fermina Murray, who is our historian on HLC, come up and talk about other aspects.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp.
Fermina?
Ms. Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. We had a site visit yesterday, and that was really our first visit since our last hearing, and also when members of the Commission have been very worried about sort of the piecemealing of this, and that was part of the process at the beginning, because it was a very difficult project. But as the project developed, things really sort of got away from really understanding from month to month what was really happening. If you have all the copies of all the minutes from the HLC, and of course those are just highlights of the HLC's meetings. I had come to join the Commission in 2004, so obviously this was well before times that I was there and not there. One of the biggest issues that commissioners have expressed in the various meetings is that northwest corner on Alvaro Road. I also was one of the commissioners who voiced a lot of strong opinions about the character of that northwest corner. And it's really the essence of it to the commissioners of the Landmark Commission is the preservation of the character-defining parts of the site. And that is the entrance that Mr. Sharp had spoken about, those row of eucalyptus trees on Alvaro Road. And yesterday, as we walked on the site, once again, that character-defining part of the site really came much stronger focus as you walk down from Alvarado Road, walking down or walking up. You had that sense that this was a place that is very special, and it is that sense that adds to the not only the character of the site but the character of the entire neighborhood. And I think that's why you see a lot of people coming here and speaking for it. Now, if you go to the east side, northeast side or east side, you will notice all those letters were there for the project, because the encroachment there is very minimal. And it really is very minimal. And also there's the row of trees over there are being preserved as well. And it also helps that there's the dip into the Mission Village. And so what we really want to communicate is that the character of this site is here and there. And you have to stop and think, okay, what is the exchange for that? If we lose that character, if we lose those eucalyptus trees or that section, what are we really exchanging for? We have a utility facility for laundry. We are basically, in my personal opinion, exchanging laundry site or facilities to accommodate in exchange for losing the character of our site. And those are the issues that we wrestle with the HLC. Most of the buildings, the swimming pool, all the things, other things that are on the revised master plan, the swimming pool, the Mission Village architecture and all that, we worked really hard at the HLC, and even Bill Lavoie was there at the time, worked very hard to get those buildings to look really well. And I think you can see in our minutes that we don't talk too much about the Mission Village. Most of the comments are on that northwest corner. So I impart with you with all that, including my personal comments, but also reflecting on what the Commission has been talking about that may not be reflected in the minutes. Thank you very much.
Could I ask you a quick question, please?
Yes.
Thank you. The row of eucalyptus trees, there is a tree removal plan here. The trees you're speaking of are the five is it?
The 5 eucalyptus trees.
Five
and-
that are shown being preserved on the tree removal plan, correct?
Yeah, yes, and but in the document it says that they're conditioned to the opinion of an arborist and whether they're diseased or not. Well, we have a real problem with that at the HLC because dealing with that has to do also with the proposed plan of the parking lot and all these modifications that are asking. Those things are going to encroach on those trees. So if you say that is the character defining part and we need to preserve it, then you have to really look at the proposed project and the modifications that might impact those trees. So it's sort of a hard issue to deal with, but it's more, okay, how is the revised modification going to impact the character-defining part of the site? I don't know if I answered your question. But
Any other questions for Ms. Murray? Well, thank you so much.
you very much.
Mr. Sharp and Ms. Murray, for coming out today. Please, please, please. It's very important during these meetings. Don't applaud. Don't cheer. Just keep it quiet and to yourself because it disrupts the meeting, and this is a meeting that's supposed to be fair. So we are not clapping. No clapping at the meeting. If you want to clap, go outside. There's probably some clappers out there waiting. Thank you, Danny. Okay. Now we have a wealth of public comment, which we welcome. So bearing in mind, if you've yielded time, you've really yielded it. And to the people to whom time have been yielded, please remember, there is an end to the time. So that being said, and 2 minutes for folks, please. And we're all set. So, and I have the timer. When you see me doing this, that means I'm watching. Okay, Elizabeth Leslie, followed by Jim Knight.
Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for listening to all of us. And we are really impressed with the presentation by the Orient Express, and we all wish, as neighbors, that we had somebody to come with the same kind of presentation on our concerns. But my main concern is I am only talking about myself now, and I know my neighbors do feel the same. My house is at 1970. Oh, I should tell you my name. Sorry. Elizabeth Leslie, 1970 Mission Ridge Road, which is directly across the street from the new proposed utility distribution plant and the facility, which is approximately 11,500 feet under the surface. Okay, the main problem that we see is right now we have this wonderful feeling of quiet, tranquility, etc. When they finish the parking lot, which is an asphalt parking lot, we're going to wake up every morning with cars being pulled in and out. It's a tandem parking area. And we're going to have to deal with that for the rest of our life as long as we live across from the El Encanto parking lot. So we are very concerned that there could be possible conciliation or reconciliation with Orient Express, that somehow could be underground. And the most wonderful thing, which I think is part of what our wonderful Fermina has mentioned, we've lost the tranquility and the charm of that northwest corner. We've lost our 3 little houses. They're gone. We're now getting an asphalt parking lot with a fence around it. So could we just say to all of you as well, wouldn't it be wonderful if the 3 little houses could come back? The parking could go underneath, the planting could be put back in place, and the rest of the facility, which is quite wonderful, could go forward. I think all of us could be very happy with that. So I don't know if my 2 minutes are up, but it looks like they might be.
Just now.
Okay.
But thank you very much.
all.
Thanks for being timely. All right, Jim Knight, please, followed by Bridget Forsell.
Chair Larson, members of the Planning Commission, I'm Jim Knight. I'm president of the Riviera Association. The 79-year-old organization represents approximately 1,800 homes on the Riviera. One of our stated mission goals has been for continuous maintenance of highest standard of living characteristic of the area. So it's very near and dear to the association what happens there in terms of building. The association has participated in this process since the property was acquired by the Orient Express, and a company that is well-known, has well-known credentials in preservation of historic properties all over the world. We believe that many of the neighbors and city residents were excited to hear about the much-needed renovation and want to see it completed. While we understand the stated concerns of some immediate neighbors, we believe that the issues have been evaluated, addressed, and we believe they've also been mitigated. The size of the report you have there before you is a good documentation of the process. For almost a century, this property, like many residences on the Riviera, has been an asset to all members of the community. Many are concerned about a possible Miramar hotel factor on this site, and we'd urge you to avoid this if at all possible. We'd urge you to assess the changes you've heard here today and as quickly as practical to move on with this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being so succinct. Ms. Forcell, followed by Pete Giordano.
Good afternoon, Chair Larson and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brigitte Forcell. I'm a 35-year Riviera resident living at the end of Las Tunas Road. Mission Ridge Road and Alvarado Place are the way I travel to get down the hill and also back up, often several times a day. I would like to see the El Encanto property restored and functioning as soon as possible. Many of the neighbors here today I know personally and respect their stated concerns. However, it is my belief that the planning process has been attentive to the historic significance of the El Encanto property, as shown and documented by the many Historic Landmark Commission reviews. Major concerns regarding noise issues in the northwest corner of the property have been studied and evaluated by certified professionals. Scientific methodologies were applied in the preparation of the reports before you. For years, I have been involved with the many issues affecting our unique neighborhood. Much concern was expressed when Marymount School presented a master plan and when the Riviera Park Special District was proposed. Because of the careful city planning process, both finished projects turned out to be beneficial to our neighborhood. They are openly enjoyed by neighbors and the public. They continue to be valuable assets to our city. This can also happen with the project before you, the historic El Encanto property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Pete Giordano, please, followed by Ronald Hayes.
Chairman Larson, my name is Peter Giordano, and I've lived here a long time, and I've always lived here for 74 years. That's a long time. I appreciate Santa Barbara, and I have to tell you that I have visited that property. I'm a former resident on the Riviera, as Mrs. Sheila Lodge, well, I was her neighbor at one time, so up in that. I know it's not right there. This, I want to just say, I am totally supportive of this project. I understand about neighbors, but if I didn't want to have airplane noise, I wouldn't move towards and buy property next to an airport. If I was concerned about noise and changes, I wouldn't buy next to a hotel. You know, I've gone through with this with the Miramar and Westmont College, and it is concerning to me how you could ever buy at a piece of property if you don't want to have noise. You know, Mr. Sharp is one of my good friends, and he's saying that the opening is too wide. Well, I've gone there, and our trucks have gone there over the years, and there were accidents going in that narrow opening. So because something is historical, it can be hysterical also, and it was not a good entrance going in there. I'm sure you've read in the newspaper recently that we've had some 40 restaurants close in Santa Barbara. Yes, that's just not a restaurant. But we have a lot of working people in the back of the kitchens and the front of the kitchen would like to have jobs in a first-class organization like this. I've had the good fortune of being at Orient Express Properties. They probably train their people as good as any people in the industry and not entertainment, hospitality industry. They call you by name. They say thank you. It always is amazing to me how they can train their people so well. So we've got a great operator. We need the sales tax. We need the bed tax. We need all the taxes. We're in a tough time. We're all going to come through this, but let's not delay this project anymore. And all we have to do is look down the coast to the Miramar and see what has happened. We've got a wonderful operator who has the financial ability to do it, runs a first-class operation. So let's get the thing on the go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giordano. Ronald Hayes, followed by Donna Boo.
Thank you, Madam Larson. My name is Ronald Hayes, live at 2016 Mission Ridge Road, directly northwest of the corner in question, the northwest corner. I believe I must state, first of all, that every individual in the neighborhood is behind Peter Giordano's sympathy that we want this hotel to open. There's no question about that. The sticking point, the only sticking point that the neighbors have is we do not want a monolith operating facility which in a location which has historically been 3 very quiet, sedate cottages. And for that fact to even be before you as a presentation, to me, is a failure of staff to step back and take a look at what the heck they're talking about. This is not a commercial hotel corner. It is not a parking lot. The 17 parking spaces that were there were built in the 1970s by Ron Ewells. He did it illegally, without permits. There were no curbs, no planters. And to use that parking lot for those 17 spaces as the basis to jump off and present this kind of a proposal for what's coming off at the northwest corner is an absolute travesty. I cannot believe that staff has gone along and supported that. We have a certain trust between the residents of this community and the staff that proceeds through that controls the process of getting permits and approvals. That trust, ladies and gentlemen, has been absolutely, abjectively, totally violated by staff, and I'm really upset about it. I would expect that you would sit back, take a hard look at the realities. The comment was made about HLC giving positive support. Absolutely not. I have been to every HLC meeting, and I never once came away from that meeting feeling that HLC had an inkling to support the proposed modifications to the project. I have no idea where staff got that comment. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, and it's absolutely a bald-faced lie. And enough of that. So moving forward, I would hope that you would take a serious review of things before you. And I ask, how can this proposal in any way be historically compatible with the site? And as I close, I want you to know we do want the project to go through. We just don't want it to go through with that northwest corner being such an abomination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes. Donna Boo, followed by Lynn Cedarquist. Welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Donna Boo, and I'm here on behalf of many concerned neighbors of the El Encanto and the citizens of Santa Barbara. The neighbors in the community have been ignored and disrespected by the Orient Express. You will recall that the neighbors filed an appeal at the end of 2008 over the Planning Commission's approval of the El Encanto's Phase 1 master plan. We started a petition and in a very short time gained almost 100 signatures. The general feeling of everyone was, what happened? Why did things change? What happened to the quaint, low-key resort? And how come no one seems to know about it? Then, all of a sudden, the Orient Express withdrew their Phase 1 approval to instead submit one single master plan, and our appeal was negated. It truly seemed like a step in the right direction, that maybe they were finally going to work with the neighbors. What has changed since then? Absolutely nothing. Except they succeeded in getting the appeal withdrawn. The plans are still the same. There's even more conflict with the neighbors. No attempts at compromise have been made. The plan is still being piecemealed, and everyone seems to just be accepting it. This is preposterous. Our voice is not being heard, not being recognized. Sadly, since nothing has changed, I bring our petition to you now to show you that the neighbors and people of this community care and want their voice to be heard. With the Orient Express delaying the reopening, there is plenty of time to demand this be done correctly and that the neighbors' concerns are given merit. I have copies of the petition here for each of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Boo.
Hello,
Lynn
my name is Lynn
Yeah.
Cedarquist, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ray and Ogle Conco. They live at 2010 Mission Ridge Road. They want their voice to be heard. They are voting no on this new proposal. It seems strange to me that they could come to a community and give a proposal of what they're going to do and then turn around and change it. I don't understand how somebody could propose that we're going to build something in your neighborhood and then turn around and change it. And it seems to be that one corner where the parking lot is going to increase in size, which will bring traffic and noise and pollution. This parking lot is not downtown Santa Barbara. It's right smack in the middle of a neighborhood where mothers stroll their babies and elderly people exercise. And if this proposal were exactly the way they gave it to the community in the first place, we wouldn't be here today. Why don't they just put the parking lot underground and put plants on it and move ahead like everybody wants? I don't understand that. And then to say that because of the natural slope, it's going to take care of the noise. Everybody knows that noise rises. So where's it going to go? Right into the neighborhood. So if really hindsight is 20/20 vision, it's time to be insightful and really think about this new proposal. Go back to its original phase, smaller in density, that will be compatible to a tranquil and peaceful neighborhood. And I hope that when you vote on this, years from now, you can say, I stood for the people and the tranquility of this neighborhood as if it were my own, and not for the development that is being proposed now by the Orient Express. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gianmarco Von Yurt, followed by Tim Angelo.
Dear Chairman, dear Commissioners, my name is Gianmarco Von Yurt. I live directly across of the proposed central plant at 2016 Mission Ridge Road. Thank you for your time today. The Orient Express first piecemealed the project and then ignored and stonewalled the neighbors. Statements from the HLC and Planning Commission to work with the neighbors regarding the central plant and operations facility and the above-ground parking structure have been ignored by the Orient Express. The plans in front of you today are the same that were presented last year. Nothing has changed. This feels just like a waste of time. The Orient Express sent a letter to all neighbors on January 15th, saying, we have decided to push back the completion date of the hotel to 2011. Now, there is time to work with the neighbors to find a better solution. Please continue to direct the Orient Express to present plans that are compatible, as these are obviously not. And just on a side note, when Trish Allen made the presentation, for a fact, the utilities at the El Encanto projects are available on all 4 sides of the property. You can download that map from the Public Works. There is no need to have the central plant. The farthest away point from any of the locations, from the hotel and from the proposed buildings, that is not efficient. You want to have it central, in the middle, where you have the closest ratio to it. And there must be a better place to find it. Those are my comments. I tried to wrap it up, make it short. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And now Tim Angelo, please, followed by Dana Morrow.
Yeah, my name's Tim Angulo, and I live at 2245 Las Tunas. And back of my property is about 100 yards from the northwest corner. And basically, I'm opposed to above-ground parking and the utility building being located there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dana Morrow, are you here? Yep. Followed by Joanna Von Yurt. Joanna Von Yurt.
Dear Commissioners, thank you for your time again today. I just wanted to apologize on the site visit on Thursday. I did not realize that we were not allowed to make comments. I didn't mean to be disrespectful.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Joanna Von Yurt. I live at 2016.
Okay, so we don't have Dana Morrow here?
Oh, I came
one
up
second.
because I thought you said he wasn't here.
I don't
I think
see-
he had
she's
to
not-
move his car.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So again, hopefully I can start over. I just wanted to apologize for speaking the other day. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I value that the commissioners, your time and service to this community are respected, especially because the Planning Commission was formed as a citizens group. The commission creates a unique checks and balance system for our city to make sure that the community is always heard and respected and that city ordinances are followed and enforced. I think the main concern that all the neighbors have with this project is what is proposed is in violation of the zoning. As you're aware, RH zoning requires the least possible conflict with or disturbance with adjoining residential areas. Very simple. I think it's very, very safe to say that there is a huge conflict here. That in itself should be enough. Further, for staff to say that the proposal satisfies the RH zoning because its components are necessary for the operation of the hotel is just the oddest justification I can think of. This hotel has run fine for over 90 years without having to violate zoning it has operated in, nor has it offended the neighbors around it for 90 years. So I offer a solution. There was mentioned before that HLC was not in favor of having the individual units. We took a visit recently out to San Ysidro Ranch. They showed us around. They have the individual units nicely behind each unit, just as El Encanto had for whatever 50 or however so many years air conditioning has been around. I have a photograph. They have a nice stone wall behind it. None of the neighbors there, I don't remember, were ever offended by what was going on. The parking should be put underground as it was offered to the neighbors in the first place. They're doing it in the opposite corner. They should do it in this corner. It doesn't seem very scientific to me. And the offices and laundry operations should be distributed throughout the property. The majority of time over the last 90 years, it was in the main building. And, you know, if they need to put some of it there and some of it around other places, that's acceptable, but not everything all where it was not before.
Can you wrap up, please?
Yes, thank you very much. We would also ask that just because modifications have been, because the setback modifications were encroached in the past, moving forward, that they be honored. Otherwise, I think that's setting a precedent to any developer that just because it was there in the past, moving forward, you should be able to encroach as well. So I would really like that you could look at that as well. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So, let's see, we have Mr. Nazarian, please, followed by Ellen Blair. We're trying to be good at 2 minutes.
I guess I have the other two speakers' time as well.
I don't have a note of that. So,
Mr. Nazarian does have one speaker who donated time to him, and that should be right below, just one. You said there should two.
Dan, can you straighten that out, please? One moment while we straighten this out. Sorry about that, but can I have the next speaker? Thanks. So while we straighten this out, have a seat for a moment, and we'll have Alan Blair, please. I'm going a little out of order, but thank you, Mr. Blair.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. Alan Blair. I'm a former resident of the Riviera and a concerned citizen. Most of us are here in Santa Barbara because of the quality of life which the city has developed and maintained, and which we certainly appreciate. Creating a quasi-industrial complex in the northwest area of this project certainly is not in consonance with our aims, and I'm sure they're mutual. So I ask you please to give serious consideration and deny the placement of these activities in that particular corner because of its obvious impact and degradation of the quality of life for the residents around. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see if we've sorted out our little puzzle here. Thank you. Margot Kenny, followed by Paul Cashman.
Hi. My name is Margot Kenny. I live at 2221 Las Tunas, and we're one house behind Mission Ridge. And I've been a realtor for 32 years, 24 of that in Santa Barbara, and I've lived there almost 24 years. And that's one of the most expensive areas and nicest areas of the Riviera. Median price up there is well over $2.5 million. The rural quality, we didn't buy next to an airport. We bought next to a rural hotel. And I do respect the Planning Commission, and I tell clients of mine who are very frustrated with the building process is the reason it's taking so long is that they protect you and they protect your quality of life. And that's why you like it here better than L.A., because we've preserved that quality. And really, this northwest corner is practically insane compared to what was there, these little board and batten darling cottages. And the parking lot is one thing, but what they don't show you in this picture is in the dark spot, there's what I understand to be an 8-foot tall ventilation tower that's going to be noisy 24 hours. Right now, when we open our doors at night, we hear crickets. We're going to hear, you know, it's Orpit Park on the south end. No one lives there. Why was that not considered as a place to output the noise? And I understand it's within the city decibel levels, but we didn't have anything close to the acceptable levels being generated up there before, or even now. So I just please try to consider this and property values, and I've sold a lot of houses. I live there. I'm just appealing to you to try to preserve the real nice quality that we had. And maybe they have delayed this till 2011. Maybe they can do something to put the noise towards Orpit Park, which at midnight, nobody cares if there's noise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul Cashman, followed by Edward Cooper.
Chair Larson, members of the commission, my name is Paul Cashman. I'm a resident of the Riviera. Let's see, on December 31st in 2008, I finished my third term as president of the Riviera Association, and so I've been personally involved with the Orient Express project since the Orient bought the project. Our role as a neighborhood association has been, to participate in the process and facilitate dialogue between the neighbors and between all stakeholders. The Riviera Association doesn't typically get involved and take a for or against position. Rather, our goal is to bring people together, have the conversation, try to come out with a better project because of that dialogue. I'm no longer president of the association. I'm speaking on behalf of Paul Cashman, and I'll just, so I'll be direct. But I believe, my experience, because I've been through it, I know the neighbors, we know each other. We have had dialogue. That the Orient Express has had open dialogue with myself and with the Riviera Association. We might not agree, or the neighbors might not agree, but I do believe that they have been attempting to mitigate the neighborhood impacts and really to provide us with a world-class hotel. The planning process has been thorough. And in Jim Knight's letter, or that he read to you, says, while we understand the stated concerns of the immediate neighbors, we believe that the issues have been evaluated, addressed, and mitigated. I simply stated the concerns of the Riviera Association, who represents the entire neighborhood up there, about 1,800 homes, feels that they have been addressed. I think it comes down to this northwest corner, and that is, when I read the studies, that is just science. And either there is noise going to be emitted that exceeds our accepted levels, or it's not. And so either you believe, those people that you've hired, the engineers to conduct these studies, or you don't. For me, it's just science. So I understand the concerns, but I really don't share them. So I do support the project and appreciate your support today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Edward Cooper, followed by Dana Morrow.
My name is Edward Cooper. I live on Mission Ridge Road. My wife and I came to Santa Barbara about 12 years ago. We stayed at the El Encanto while we looked for a home. We'd never been in Santa Barbara before, and we liked the neighborhood, and we bought a house a block or so away, and we're very happy there. We were happy to be at the El Encanto, and the El Encanto was not perfect at the time. Everyone looks back at it as having a shining light above it. It was an old hotel. This hotel is going to be beautiful. It's a classy operation. It's the current plan has evolved. It hasn't just sprung up as a new plan. I was at most of the meetings. They have listened to the neighbors. They have reconstructed because of the neighbors. Almost every person that I speak to in my neighborhood has some connection to the El Encanto, a good connection, whether it's dinner, walking through the garden, a wedding, where all some of these comments seem to be that nobody is in favor, the neighborhood is against it. My part of the neighborhood is for it, and we would love you to consider to put it through quickly so that we can have a hotel there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Dana Morrow, did you make it back yet? Nope. Okay. Greg Parker, please, followed by Steve Cushman.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Greg Parker. I live at 1940 Mission Ridge Road, directly across from the Mission Village project. I have read the EIR, the comments, the request for an EIR, the MND, the comments and response to comments, and I believe that the environmental impacts of the proposed modifications have been adequately addressed. I read the acoustics study. I am also concerned with noise. My house is closer to the El Encanto, although not necessarily this northwest corner, than many of the others. And there are a number of noise-generating factors, and I believe it's within the limits established by the city. I think the city ought to approve the efficient use of property. I like the fact that they're reducing a surface parking lot, because I understand it's not an old cottage situation, but the existing approval is 53 spaces on that northwest corner, and they're moving it down to 44, maybe it's 52 down to 43. And I think, and they're moving them underground. They're moving them underground right across the street from my house, and I think that's an efficient use of space to do that. I think that no matter what, if you reduce a parking lot 17%, you're going to reduce whatever noise is there by 17%. I've watched the story polls with great interest. I think the way they're going to build this project, especially the Mission Village, won't affect views, and won't affect views from my house, which look out right across from the property. I support the transfer of development rights in this case. I don't support all of them, but in this case, it's not increasing the utilization of the facility. They're not adding rooms. I think they're increasing the quality of the product, and I believe in that. I share the concerns previously expressed in terms of time. I've watched the Carrillo Hotel be a giant hole for a couple of years. We know what's happening at Los Entradas. We've looked at West Fest Parker struggles. We've watched the Miramar. We really don't need a partially constructed project out here for an extended length of time. So I encourage you to let the project move forward as quickly as you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Steve Cushman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Steve Cushman, President of the Chamber of Commerce. I also live on the Riviera. The Chamber supports this project. It's one of my favorite hotels in Santa Barbara, and I think they've done their due diligence, done their science, and hopefully you can approve the project. It can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cushman. Now, Mr. Nazarian, and you may have 6 minutes with the time. Thank you for doing the math, by the way, Danny. It really helps me out. Well, it's important when you're sitting here.
I try to reduce it.
Thank you. 6 minutes.
I try to be more quick.
Oh, even better. Okay,
definitely.
thank you. Go.
Farak Nazarian, 1978 Mission Ridge Road. And Chair Larson, Honorable Commissioners, El Encanto site and cottages used to be a residential campus for Santa Barbara Normal School. After the school was relocated, the campus was given permit as a cottage hotel with a hotel residential zoning ordinance, which by definition of the title meant to maintain the equilibrium of a hotel amidst a residential neighborhood. Indeed, the zoning ordinance required the least possible conflict between the hotel and adjoining residences. For years, El Encanto owners and operators adhered to these requirements. El Encanto remained enchanting to the name in the middle of the picturesque Riviera. However, Orient Express, through many piecemeal modifications and the ones in front of the commissioners for approval, are violating the zoning ordinance requirement by putting all the noisy, polluting, and undesirable aspects of the project in a northwest corner. The site plan should be revised. this kind of development is more suited to commercial zoning rather than a hotel residential. Contained in the application for before the commissioner's approval is also a mitigated negative declaration, which is technically and legally incorrect. It is also defies common sense. If a hotel builds a utility plant, whether underground or above the ground, plus valet parking, plus laundry, plus the back office operation, with all the noise and fume it will generate in front of your gate, and tells you that it will not have negative environmental impact on you, your family, and your quality of life, and that of your neighbors. Would you, in all honesty, accept that? The Orient Express has been trying to have maximum keys with the least expense for profitability, and the city has been eager to accommodate in order to get El Encanto's operation come online and generate much-needed cash for Treasury. But we have seen how badly things would go. And we go wrong when principles are being sacrificed for financial gains. Being confident of the city's support, Orient Express has been continually reluctant to sit down and talk with the neighbors and community in order to come to some understanding and compromise, despite the urging of the commissioners and HLC. The plan that Orient Express is pushing for cannot be the only possible plan for a 7-acre site. There are green individual hot water boilers and individual green hot water boilers and air conditioning units. Parking can be placed underground, as it was proposed in the beginning, or the concentration of the back office utility, laundry, and parking can be dispersed throughout the site. The plan can and should be revised with the urging and guidance of the Commissioner. We are as anxious as the city might be for El Encanto's door to be open as soon as possible. Orient Express is now planning to open in 2011, so there is plenty of time for revision and change and to remodel and rebuild El Encanto in harmony with our neighbors.
Thank you very much. And I do want to mention yielding time were Sally Nazarian and Catherine Calise. Thank you very much, Mr. Nazarian. And now we come to Mark Chitillo. I know I didn't say it right. I'm sorry. I did?
Perfect.
Oh, Easter miracle. Mr. Chitillo, you have a total time of 12 minutes. And I'd like to say yielding time are Nancy Hayes, Bob Leslie, Pat Fulmer, Bob Fulmer, and Ron Sorgman. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Mark Chitillo, and I'm an attorney. I represent 3 of the neighbors that are located in the outside of the northwest corner, and I think you've heard from a lot of other folks in the community that have concerns. You've received letters from the Allied Neighborhood Association as well as the Citizens Planning Association. The concern that we all have is to protect the character of this neighborhood and to protect this site. I think everybody loves the El Encanto and we want it back. But we want the right El Encanto back, and what's being proposed is not acceptable. It has morphed from what was approved in 2004 and what has been there prior to that through a series of substantial conformity determinations and modifications to come up with a proposal that's before you now which just doesn't fit the site. And in particular, it requires the placement of substantial structures within the setbacks. And that's the biggest concern that's before us today. And the request that we have for you is to deny the modifications in the northwest corner. That's the action that you can take today, which will accomplish what we've been trying to work out with the landowner of revising the site plan and get that heavy equipment out of the northwest corner. The concerns we have are that the back of the house has been moved into this northwest corner, and as a consequence, the folks in the in that area are going to suffer disproportionate effect. Now, Madam Chair, I see I have a minute 29. Are you going to go through?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just so that I can be respectful of your time.
No, you have actually a total of 12 minutes.
Right.
But you were a minute and 29 into it.
Okay. Okay, I see. All right, very good.
Now I reset you and I got to do the math. That's okay.
Okay, I'll aim
Keep
for 11
going.
minutes. How about that?
Keep going. You're fine.
Thank you. We've heard from staff. From staff some significant new information that had not been previously available. First, the staff report reported that the Measure E numbers all came from the small and minor addition category. We objected to that in our comments, and today I see that there are other numbers that are brought forward to identify the pool from which those increases would come from. And secondly, we had asked for visual simulations and felt that they were appropriate. Our experts specifically said that that was necessary. Today we saw them. Now, I don't know. I've been working with staff. I had no knowledge that any of this information was out there. Should your commission determine that it's not appropriate to deny the modifications as we request, we'd suggest that it's appropriate to continue this hearing so we can have a chance to look at this information which is presented just here today that's relevant to the environmental concerns and the issues that we've raised. I'm going to talk first about CEQA now, and then I'm going to talk about the land use planning process and how we see this issue should work out. CEQA, as you know, is a full disclosure statute, and it employs a low threshold for the preparation of an EIR when there is a fair argument of a substantial impact. Staff's analysis in the response to comments has dropped the fair argument piece and just said, well, we don't see any substantial evidence, so therefore there's no potential significant impact, so we can get by with the neg deck. I know we've talked about this at the previous hearing, but because of that low standard and the substantive comments, and I trust that you all have gotten a copy of not only the comments but the exhibits, which had some substantive information in there, you've had a chance to familiarize yourself more fully with some of the substantial issues. I'll run through them quickly. The first is visual. And we've seen visual simulations for the first time which show that indeed there is some blockage of lines of sight. There are some impacts associated with the project getting taller and bigger. That combined with a letter from expert Ken Dowd constitutes substantial evidence of a significant impact. The cases are clear on that. I'll get to talk to Scott about that later. The second issue of concern that we have is historical. And the member of the HLC who spoke to the character-defining parts, I think, hit the nail on the head. There's some here and there's some there. If you allow this process to go forward, you're going to lose what's there, and you may lose the whole thing. Do we exchange a laundry facility for the character of the historic character of the El Encanto, Hotel? Is it worth compromising the potential substantial character there in order to have the laundry located where it's proposed? Again, if you deny the modifications, that directs the landowner to come up with a better plan that doesn't involve placing those facilities in that area. The third area is noise. The noise analysis, as we identified, did not address all of the potential impacts, all of the noise sources, didn't address the issue of a backup generator. I think there will be a diesel-powered backup generator on the site. There's no evaluation of the noise impacts. The concern about valet parking and car alarms was one alerted to us by our expert acoustic fellow who happened to be a valet parker in a previous employment situation. And he said these are noisy operations. They didn't consider the noise first of the traffic that's going around the site. And if I could have a site map, I could point to that for you. But after somebody leaves the entry, the valet parker, if it doesn't go in the parking structure in the northwest corner, they're going to drive out, up Alvarado, across Mission Ridge Road, and then down into the podium parking structure. That's traffic noise that's not accounted for in the acoustical analysis. More significant, I think, is the issue of the car alarms. And in the neg deck, it says that when that cars will be locked using the clickers and unlocked manually. Well, my 2001 Subaru station wagon, of which there seems to be about 1 million of them on the road these days, if I try and do that, if I don't unlock the door with the clicker and instead use the key, the alarm goes off, and I need to go in and within 15 seconds click the ignition 10 times, and I've not been very good at that, though I've had some practice. So anyway, the point being that they haven't thought this all the way through in terms of the disclosure of the noise impacts, and that's one that I think we have some substantial concerns about. We raised it. There's no good response for it other than this. It's inadequate, and in our view, that needs to be addressed. The other issue of land use conflicts is a CEQA issue that's just ignored in the EIR. And when there's a case that's on point, pocket protectors, when there is a land use plan or a zoning ordinance requirement which is enacted for the purposes of mitigating a significant impact, the inconsistency of a project with that zoning ordinance has to be addressed as a significant impact, acknowledged as such. The zoning ordinance creates 30-foot setbacks specifically for the HR zoning area in order to protect the quiet enjoyment of the adjacent residential areas. The neg deck was silent as to that analysis and is therefore legally defective. And lastly, staff said, we raised the issue of cumulative impacts, and staff indicated that they did look at cumulative impacts, and I asked Ms. Hetrick where in the neg deck, because I didn't see it. She said for each of the areas. Well, if you go through the neg deck, and if you look at visual, there's no consideration of cumulative impacts. You look at air quality, it does address visual impacts. Biology, no cumulative impacts. Cultural, the serial loss and degradation of resources on the site, no cumulative impacts. Noise, no cumulative impacts. So CEQA requires an EIR, low threshold, when there is a fair argument of a significant impact, and if there is a potential cumulative impact, you have to. It's a mandatory finding of significance. You must prepare an EIR. And I think that the lack of an EIR and the shortcutting of the environmental review process here has shortcutted your ability to understand what are the impacts of this project and to be able to, I think, come to the right conclusion with respect to the adequacy of what's being proposed and whether or not these modifications out of the setbacks are appropriate. Moving on now to the planning issues. The zone district, RH zoning, is intended to accommodate resort hotels that are located within a residential area. And it says specifically that the zoning district, the intention of the zoning district is to ensure that the hotel will have the least possible conflict with the enjoyment of those residential properties. And we argue that by including these setbacks as part of the project and allowing this heavy equipment to go on within the setback area, you are endangering the ability of those neighbors to be able, and the community at large, to enjoy this facility. Now, the utility distribution facility itself involves a lot of very loud and very sound-generating equipment. It is heavily muffled. It's located underground. But the concern that we have is, what if that noise generation muffling doesn't work as expected? And we had trouble getting the right designs to be able to know exactly what's being proposed in terms of that shielding, but there are doors in that structure. And if you open a door which opens to a very loud noise-generating piece of equipment, that noise is going to get out, and the muffling is not going to be effective. So our concern is, well, what happens into the future if we don't have the muffling working as effectively as is proposed? And that's really the fundamental concern that we have with respect to the zoning consistency. The setbacks are there for a reason. They're intended to take that kind of heavy activity, the potential noise-generating activity, and move it away from the sensitive residential areas on the other side. Second planning issue is that of Measure E. As we indicated in our comment, in our letter to you, it was inappropriate to use the small addition and minor addition categories. You're only allowed under the ordinance for a total of 3,000 square feet. Somehow staff got to 7,021 square feet. I couldn't understand that. Now I have more information, although I very much want to see about this new parcel that they identified and about the other sources of square footage that they contend Measure E allows be used, and the other portions of the zoning ordinance allows the use on this site. Third planning issue is the covenants of restrictions, the deed restrictions that were imposed back in 2004 with that approval. It specifically limited the size of buildings on the site. And that also represents another restraint on the level of activity, the amount of development they can have on the site. Certainly the city is the signatory to that CC&R, and theoretically the city could change it. However, the neighbors are identified as being the beneficiaries of that. So we have a stake in that. And we ask that you consider that as part of the expectations that surrounding homeowners should have as they look at this facility.
Got about a minute left.
Okay. There are significant changes associated with this project. They're going to intensify, adding 17,000 square feet of new development. They're encroaching into the setbacks, in particular the northwest corner, but they're also jamming more buildings in. The Historic Landmarks Commission has been mentioned on several times, and I wanted to draw your attention to the minutes. They're in my comments, but the minutes from November 12th, 2008, their motion number 5, when they discuss the northwest corner. Acceptance of the Historic Studies report does not confer the Commission's acceptance of the current configuration of the utility distribution facility and garage as shown in the drawings. So HLC, as I think you heard from the comments of the individuals that were here, has not reached consensus and support for this project. I met with Mr. Fell after your last meeting right over there next to the bar, and he told me that no, there was no point in our trying to meet and further work out issues. They were going to just put their head down and go, and if we had to do a lawsuit, we're going to do a lawsuit.
We're at time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Thank you very much. Last call for Dana Morrow. Okay. Who didn't indicate oppose or favor, so. All right, thank you very much. And I'm anticipating, do you have a response that takes 5 minutes? Do you need to? Or can we go ahead with questions? 5 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity. Clock is ticking. I have a whole page of notes.
5 minutes.
One point, a lot of folks are concerned about the utility distribution facility, the noise, fumes. I hear fumes. I don't. There are no fumes associated with that facility. It's air cooling equipment. So it's just air coming and ventilating from that structure. What I wanted to point out, I think that the owner has exactly the same concern that the neighbors do in terms of a negative impact related to these issues. Mechanical equipment, maintenance of that equipment, the sound of that equipment, in addition to the valet parking functions. There goes my clicker again, sorry. It resets. The dark shaded, here we go, the dark shade, here's the valet parking lot. Right here is Cottage 29, a new guest cottage that's approved and will be constructed with the 2004 project. This structure is less than 50 feet away from our utility facility. In addition, we have historic cottage number 16 located right here. We have to keep these guests happy and coming back to this property. So we echo those same concerns. And this owner is committed to making sure that any impacts that there are no impacts. And that is what the system has been designed to achieve. It is not running, we've explained it. It's in the staff report. It's in my applicant letter describing how the system works, what the noise measurements resulted in at the closest property line, which is not shown here, but over here across the street, we're at 26 dBA. That's 20 decibels lower than the ambient noise level in the neighborhood. In terms of time to redesign and opening in 2011, that opening date is based on our current schedule today. Coming to this hearing, moving forward, working drawings, working through final approvals through Historic Landmarks Commission, obtaining building permits. I'm not trying to bore you with the details, but it is complex and it takes time, and it takes a significant amount of time to build these structures as well, as you've seen from the site in terms of what it takes to renovate those historic cottages. We've had mixed neighbor comment about our ability to communicate and explain the project and worked with the neighbors. Honestly, we were at a meeting in September where we wanted to bring our updated noise analysis to the neighbors to show them that this is okay. This structure will not impact and change the quality of life. We really don't want it to. we're at an impasse. I think it takes both sides to come together and have an understanding. And honestly, this is what happened at the meeting. We were not allowed to speak and explain our additional technical studies, explain how the system is to work, explain this distribution of power. This is not a power plant. It's actually a very expensive system designed to minimize these impacts. I understand at the San Ysidro Ranch they have individual systems. They're air-cooled. They're not as energy efficient as this system. We want something that's more sustainable, more green. I spoke to the architect that designed that. He said it was very tricky getting it through their historic, and in the county, the Historic Landmarks Board there.
Last minute.
In terms of what we're doing and changes and what was approved in 2004, I'm not saying we should perpetuate modifications. I think we're improving what was even previously approved in 2004. We have a parking lot in this location that is more interior to the site. It also has a building proposed in that location to further provide screening. We're depressing the surface of that parking lot, and we're putting a wall around it so that we're not having any glare, that kind of thing, coming off that parking lot. I see everything about this improving over the 2004 plan. And proposing and building structures that replace other structures that weren't desirable by the Landmarks Commission. And one last point. The HLC in November, they were reviewing our historic structures report, which brought to them information about the historic sensitivity of those eucalyptus trees. That was new information that was requested and analyzed and provided to them. The point of their comment that they're not approving the location, I think it was a deference to the Planning Commission. They were not the land use decision-making body.
Okay, we're there on time.
They were the aesthetic review body, and they supported it when they were looking at the design.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And now we'll have, we'll open for questions from the Commission to the applicant. Ms. Lodge, would you lead, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that the noise study indicates that the noise levels will be well within the city standards. What I'm interested in is how does it compare to what the noise level was when the El Encanto was operating before?
Madam Chair, I'll do my best to answer Commissioner Lodge's question. What we did was a study of the existing ambient sound level right now. And I believe that value in that portion of the property in the daytime is about 47 dBA. I'm looking for confirmation back there. So that's just the ambient. That's not analyzing the sound level in this location of the property while the hotel was operating there. So it could have been higher than the ambient. So what we analyzed was the utility distribution facility in terms of its mechanical equipment with the current design, all that sound attenuation at the property line. This property line is the closest residential property line. That level is 26 dBA as compared to 47 is the ambient. I didn't exactly answer your question, but I think that the goal, again, was to design something that we can't say isn't totally audible, but is very, very quiet and below what you're hearing just in the neighborhood, primarily due to vehicular traffic. And by the way, we did analyze the sound of vehicles traveling on the streets to the other parking structure over here. That was part of the sound analysis.
Thank you. And then how far into the setback does the proposed structure intrude, and how far are the footings from the eucalyptus trees?
I'm going to have to pull out a set of plans to look at the distances because I believe we do have those called out on. Are you interested in the distance from this property line, the Mission Ridge property line, or both?
30-foot, yes.
Well, we have two
the Alvarado Place.
Any help behind me would be appreciated.
Tried to find it on the plans, but
You want some help with the footings?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, Ms. Kennedy.
In your staff report on page 4, we discussed the setbacks. The modification is requested to allow the northwest corner of the utility distribution facility to have a 17-foot setback instead of the required 30 from both Alvarado Place and Mission Ridge Road.
okay, so 13 feet then. Okay.
That's correct. And I want to point out the amount of floor area.
And how far is that from the eucalyptus trees? I'm concerned about the distance between the trees and the construction that will be cutting through roots and so on.
I don't believe I have that scaled on a plan.
If I can just add, I'm Jim Lefevre, an architect from Gensler, the senior project architect. I've been working on this job for 4 years. I can't tell you how close they are. Right now, we don't have that survey data in front of us. What I can tell you is if the trees have to be saved, we have to work with the arborist to make sure that the footings don't kill the trees. So, that's right now we're talking about a situation where we don't have survey data that exactly places those trees in front of us right now. We do have that available elsewhere. But really what we're talking about is subterranean conditions, and once we start working on the project, we're going to have to save the trees if that's what the wish of the commission is.
Thank you. Is that?
And
keep going.
There was a mention of the 2004 deed restrictions. I'm not clear what that was.
Madam Chair, are you
referenced to.
referring to the CC&Rs, I believe? What staff does is after planning commission approval, we put together what we call the CC&Rs, and it's a way to memorialize what the approval was. So in this case, like every other project, we provide a project description as part of that, and that's recorded against the property to show what was approved. So this project does have CC&Rs recorded that outline the square footage that was approved previously. But that does not preclude them to come back and ask for a new project.
Madam Chair, I'd like to
Mr. Vincent.
add a comment regarding that. Your action today, if you were to approve the proposal before you, has equal dignity to the action that set those CC&Rs into place. Those CC&Rs, as Ms. Kennedy explained, are intended to memorialize the conditions of this commission and the City Council regarding the action, these land use actions. Properties can redevelop. You know that. You see it all the time. So to suggest that the CC&Rs freeze forever the nature of development on this property is just not legally correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge. Commissioner White?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, while we're talking about the eucalyptus trees, at the concept review, at least I had made comments about that I was concerned about the fire hazard there. And as I recall, there was at least some, was there not some input from the fire department that is a concern? And I'm wondering where we stand on those eucalyptus trees today. Are they being kept? Are they being removed? We should know what at least the purported fate of them, their purported fate is at this point.
Sure. Madam Chair, Commissioner White, as is written up in the mitigation measure for this, those 5 eucalyptus trees are to be preserved unless an arborist report that's been reviewed by staff and accepted determines that they should be removed based on disease, safety reasons. So unless we have a report that says they should be removed, they will remain. The fire department has commented on the eucalyptus trees in general, and that they would require that they be trimmed, the crowns be separated, all dead wood removed, and trimmed and maintained. And that would include any tree that would
remain. But the tree's not necessarily removed.
Right. It's to be determined whether they would need to be removed or not.
Thank you. So, laundry. I'm hearing that there was an old laundry. I'm hearing that there's a proposed laundry. What are we talking about? Are we talking about running the? Are they the same? Did the old facility handle all of its laundry there? Is the new facility proposing to handle its laundry there? Anyway, please clarify that.
We're debating who's going to field the question.
Doug Fell speaking on behalf of the applicant. I think the square footage of cottage 19, whatever the cottage number is 1,600, 1,400, 1,000 square feet, and the area proposed in the underground facility that would be devoted to laundry would be approximately 1,000 square feet. It would be related to two things. One, providing laundry service to guests on site when you spill a little wine on your pants and you want to have them ready for the dinner that night. You send them on and they'll get them done and they'll have them ready for you. The second thing will be to do what amounts to the bathrobes and the other types of maybe the towels in the bedrooms, so that they're fresh and keep them clean and on site. Otherwise, all linens, all items from the kitchen and the tables in the restaurant, all of that will be sent off site to a standard commercial laundry.
Thank you.
Obviously, one of the most surprising elements of this version of the updates is the large amount of square footage that's being proposed for back of house. How was the hotel being considered? How was the hotel imagining itself to run with this square footage not being there? It just seems sort of a shock to me to see this much square footage now being proposed on site for back of house that's wasn't imagined before.
Okay, I'm not going to give you the final answer, and I'll let someone else. But I've had an experience with this that I'd like to share with you, so that you know that this happens. I represented the Entrada project, and we won't go into what's happened to it since. But nevertheless, that whole place was designed with no back of house. And it was just a failure on behalf of the architects that were advising us at the time, and maybe the desire of the owner to maximize the square footage of other uses. But there was no back of house. There wasn't any place for anything to happen. And in the current analysis that's going on with respect to that project, because it is continuing to be evaluated, the new design is creating back a house so that the property can properly operate. So, I mean, it's more anecdotal, but it does happen that hotels get
design flaw to begin
without back a house, because everybody's thinking about everything else, and they forget you've got to run a hotel.
The concluding statement off of Mr. Fells.
How fast can you do it?
What?
We
Less
just
than a
don't
minute?
know how they were going to operate. I agree with Mr. Fell that it wasn't well thought out. It was the previous owner's project. This owner inherited, purchased, and then evaluated, and said this isn't sufficient. And in terms of, I didn't get a chance earlier to say that keeping a lot of these things on site, I see some environmental benefits. Reducing vehicular trips in the immediate area and in the community, and some air quality benefits as a result, too, to keep some of these services on site. Thank you.
And then my last question is, what other places, are there other places that the utility room, I'll use that term, can that go on site besides on the property line, the northwest property line?
Madam Chair, to attempt to answer that question, we've talked a lot about that. And my perspective on that, and I think that others in the team might have different perspectives, is I just don't think so. We took the floor area, we moved it around the site, we tried to see where it would fit. Maybe you can massage it to fit into somewhere on the site, but what would be the potential ripple effect from there in terms of potential historic impacts to the other structures, other views? This thing has to come out of the ground at some point and ventilate. This corner allows us to sink it pretty far underground and achieve the sound attenuation that we've demonstrated through our sound analysis. So I'm not totally answering your question. I don't know what it would be or what it would sound like or what those potential impacts would be. But there is not an area that works as well as this one does. And and in terms of the floor area needed to accommodate the different systems in there, we literally took a cutout and moved it around and trying to find a location that would make it work, and we could not find it. We did this exercise with staff as well. Did anyone want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Justice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project is labeled as a master plan, yet when I look at the plans, I don't see any differentiating characteristics that are any different from a comprehensive set of development plans. What's the difference?
No one's looking at me over there.
We are.
Madam Chair, to answer Commissioner Justice's question, I'm not sure what constitutes, if we have a definition in a city ordinance or within the RH zone in terms of a master plan. It's, this is our vision, this is our build out of the property. And when I came on board with this client, there was already an approved master plan that had been processing for a period of time. So I came up with the brilliant idea of calling it a revised master plan. But really, as you said, it is when I found out there was an additional planning processing fee, I thought, well, I should have looked at that first and just called it a development plan instead of a revised master plan. I don't know if staff has. I don't have a good answer.
I'm not trying to make jokes here. I was curious. The second question has to do with the remarkable unit that we were taken through on the site visit on Tuesday that has been refurbished inside and is just an exquisite piece of interior design, and a lot of work has gone into that. That was a unit that did have two exterior doors, and I was curious if there are lockout units that would create more units than buildings. Are we creating an additional set of keys for the larger units so that they can be used as different, as two units as opposed to one hotel unit?
I think I'll turn that one over to Mr. Fowle.
I think you can check with Kathleen and you'll find out that the 92 units counts or includes the lockout unit as one of the 92 keys. And I think staff will confirm that too.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Larson. I have two questions. This process, we've been, first I think the super old plan was 2002, and then the approved one was 2004. And since the 2004 plan, between then and today, there has been some changes on the property. The building is a little bigger than it was before. The original building that was torn down, now it's been rebuilt. There's some square footage increases, and those were made through substantial conformance determinations. And my question is, if we approve this current master plan with its allocation of square footage and so on, how much more over the next 4 years or so could the site owner add on? I mean, is there some percentage that says here's how much more you can have without having to go through a review process like this one?
Okay.
Any lawyer would do.
The totals, and hopefully Scott can agree with me. We have roughly 17,000 square feet of additional square footage, 10,000 of it TDR, and the rest being on site through various matters. There are none left. If we were to use the 17, it would be gone. It would be possible, although who knows what's going to happen in the new general plan, that the owner could go out and buy TEDRs and try and get approval of something. But that certainly is not in anybody's plan, and I don't really think that that we could ever get it approved because of the historical issues and all of that. But otherwise, that will be left, zero.
So but if there was some need, some unforeseen need, like the current unforeseen need that happened some years down the road, and you needed 2,000 square feet, and maybe staff can answer this. Can that 2,000 square feet come in through a staff approval, or does it have to, again, be put through a hearing process?
Madam Chair, with respect to the element that gives us the greatest amount of certainty regarding this plan is the fact that this project and the proposal before you today is using all of its Measure E square footage. It's even asking for more and is using all of it that it's asking for. They can't get more square footage under Measure E without coming back to the Planning Commission. They don't have, it would require another development plan approval. As far as could there be any changes, the Measure E square footage definition looks at hotel rooms as being a hotel room. It doesn't count the square footage in the hotel room. There could be some limited changes to the shape and outline of the rooms consistent with Measure E through substantial conformance determinations. As the prior substantial conformance determinations, they are handled in a process that outlined in your guidelines, the Planning Commission's guidelines. The level of review given to a substantial conformance determination is based on the scope of the request. It varies from administrative staff level reviews to having Planning Commission hearings and comments to the Community Development Director. Again, the bottom line is, at the end of the day, the Community Development Director has to make a determination that any substantial conformance determination request is substantially conforming to the actions of this commission. So I don't think any of us, the nature of construction projects make it almost impossible, particularly remodeling projects, make it almost impossible to sit here today and say with absolute certainty that there won't be any further changes. But the Measure-E limitations on the square footage outside of the rooms is a very limiting factor for this project at this point. And so there could be some changes to the room orientations themselves, but I don't see any additional square footage coming to this project without coming back before you.
And one other additional limitation, I just leaned over and talked to Alex about it, is most or substantially all of the units are historical, and we don't have the freedom that a typical project might have to push it out here or change it here. The historical facilities will remain in their historical configuration. There are 2 or 3 units that are not considered historical, and those might be able to have some push and shove.
And then my second question is, when looking at the visual aesthetics discussion, it talks about the existing visual setting, and I'm presuming, and I just want to confirm that that means that's the 2009 existing visual setting, not the 2004 where we saw the first master plan.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Jacobs, we took into account in the initial study the 2004 approval and then approvals that occurred after that as part of the analysis.
But the term existing refers to what?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Jacobs, the term existing refers to the conditions on the site right now.
Thanks.
That's it for you? Okay, great. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some questions for staff regarding the clarification on the setback encroachments. When you compare the current application with the prior 2004 application, the modifications are listed quite differently. In the original application, modification 1 was for the parking, which is at the northwest corner, to encroach both into Alvarado Place and Mission Ridge as one encroachment. Now in the new plan, it's divided up into 2 separate encroachments. It makes it look like the project is much less compliant, even though you're encroaching in the same location into the same 2 setbacks. Is there a reason that it's done differently?
Madam Chair. Commissioner Bartlett, yes, it is. And when I reviewed the draft staff report, it was actually had the same language as before, but we don't actually count them that way. We count modifications, any number of encroachments into a certain setback counts as one encroachment, right? So in the previous staff report, it showed as one modification the parking lot going into Alvarado and Mission Ridge, and then it showed another encroachment on Mission Ridge, what's now the Mission Village, as an encroachment into Mission Ridge and the interior setback. So, and it's just kind of it's the same modification, but I thought that they were, they're just organized wrong. So it's the same type of encroachment, it's the same number, but if you look carefully, it's you'll see in 2 different locations an encroachment to Mission Ridge Road, where now we only show 1, and it's organized differently is all.
Just a longer list of the same items.
A different list of the same items, yes.
And then another question then regarding Mission Village. I don't know if you can maybe scroll back to the slide that shows Mission Village on the modification for the setback distance between buildings. I interpret this village as being one structure. It's all on top of the big parking podium, one big structure. Why are we having setback encroachments between the little appendages and those units are linked together by common walls along the site and everything else, and yet you're calling out in other words, if it's built as one solid building, the modification goes away, right? But when you try and break it up to look smaller, you're penalized with modifications?
Chair Larson, Commissioner Bartlett, yes and no. It's not exactly one building. We went around and around with the applicants on this. It's actually, the parking structure is a separate underground facility with some number of feet of dirt on top of it, and then the buildings built on top of them separately on their own separate foundations. It's a strange situation, and we went back and forth, like I said, to determine whether that's one building or not, and we ended up saying those are all separate buildings, so the distance between buildings applies.
And then last question, do we have the aerial photograph? Do we know how far are the neighboring residences that are most impacted in that northwest corner? I mean, the appearance of the site trip was that the driveways are quite long, so.
Can we venture an answer?
Looks like it's at least a half or a third of the property width distance away. It's pretty substantial.
Mr. Shatilla.
Madam Chair, thank you. Since I represent the Leslies, that is, and if there's a pointer in the, thank you. Trish, sorry. This house right there is the Leslies, correct?
Correct.
And your house is 73 feet from the?
We need to have everything, all the conversation up here because it's broadcast.
I just wanted to confirm. So it's 73 feet, their house at its closest location is 73 feet from the road. Now, they're not the closest driveway to the utility distribution facility site. However, they are, I believe, the most proximate house. But there are also houses, and these houses are back a bit. But I think the Leslies are probably the closest house at 73 feet.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. We'll have Ms. Lodge next, and then Mr. Justice.
Madam Chair, are we still asking questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait a second. Do you mind if I have Mr. Thompson go next because he hasn't spoken yet?
Yes, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
I already asked my questions. I already asked my questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're ready for comments. Mr. Thompson, please. Questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have simply one question for staff. We're asked to make about 7 discretionary decisions here, and the issue of most interest today has been the first 2 modifications about the utility distribution in the northwest corner. And we're required to make findings that this encroachment is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement. And the necessary part is where I have a question. I see nothing in the record here to tell me that it's impossible to have the utility distribution portions that occur above ground outside of the setback. In other words, we've got a big geographic area there with a large underground basement structure, and some of it has to occur above ground for the exhaust and so forth. But I didn't see anything in the record that showed that no other location that's not in the setback was possible. So to make a finding that this location is necessary, I would think we might need to have that kind of information. And I just wondered if you could point me to it or somebody could explain it.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Vincent.
If I could make a comment regarding that modification finding. And I believe Commissioner Bartlett and I have had discussions about the proper interpretation of this finding and its language. I would submit there are 2 different ways of looking at this modification finding. One is that the modification is necessary because the proposal of the applicant is contrary to the existing standard, and that it is up to the Commission, when making the finding, to determine whether or not the proposal is appropriate, whether the improvement to the property is appropriate. Another reading that some people have professed, but I don't agree with that type of reading of it, is that the improvement must be necessary. I find that the modification finding, I agree with the first reading of it, that the word necessary is modifying the fact, or explaining the fact that the improvement requires the modification because it is contrary to the standard. And I focus the Commission's attention on the determination of whether or not the improvement is appropriate to the site as the appropriate place to put your discretion. That's my take on that particular finding.
Madam Chair, if I could go on with Mr. Vincent a little bit. I know we've had that discussion before, and the gist that I was getting at is not that the function isn't an appropriate improvement, because we've already discussed that back-of-house things are needed to make the hotel functional, but I haven't seen that this is the necessary location for it. Nothing in the record shows that the part of the above-ground part of this UDF couldn't be outside the setback, and that was my question: is where is the record or discussion about why it ended up in this location and therefore making a modification necessary?
Madam Chair, I would say that those are all absolutely good topics that would be subsumed into the determination of whether or not the improvement is appropriate. In other words, if the applicant can show you where it can go someplace else, or if somebody else could explain that, then that would, I think, would factor into your determination of whether or not the improvement where it is proposed is appropriate. So I think the factors still, or the question and consideration that Commissioner Thompson is outlining is still absolutely an appropriate part of this consideration. I just wanted to focus on the particular language and where I thought that consideration appropriately lies. Sorry to use the same word.
It's okay, Mr. Vincent. We appreciate your being here. So, Mr. Justice?
A couple questions I wanted to ask for staff, and the first has to do with the timing of the additional 3,000 square foot that was given when or actually it was more than 3,000 when the lots were merged as a part of the 2004 approval. And I'm not sure whether does that additional entitlement go forward after that approval was made and is kind of a credit from the last approval? Or how are those treated when you have a lot merger that has taken place in the past and now a current project in front of the Commission which seeks to apply those density credits?
Madam Chair, I'll be happy to answer that question. Measure E anticipates the merger and division of land going forward. It sets the entitlement of the parcels as they existed in 1989 when Measure E was adopted, and it goes forward. The land is entitled with its Measure E allocation. Measure E anticipates divisions if a parcel is divided after Measure E. The Measure E allotment is divided amongst the divisions of the original lot. In the same way, there's a conservation of Measure E mass or square footage by, in this case, multiple lots, each of which had its own Measure E allocation as of the adoption of Measure E. When they are merged together, there's still the conservation of the Measure E square footage.
Okay, so in a RH zone, which is a little different zone than a non-residential zone, it's kind of in between those two. Those very same assumptions carry forth.
Absolutely, and the way I would explain there have been some comments about the RH versus Measure E issue, and The Measure E square footage it deals with non-residential development. This hotel is non-residential development, and so therefore has to deal with Measure E allocations. There's a separate item in the RH zone that deals with lot area coverage and how non-residential uses of that lot area coverage. They're two different things. They come at similar issues in some ways, but they're entirely separately dealt with, and the compliance is entirely separate. So I don't want to. I want to caution the Commission from trying to mix and match Measure E versus RH zoning. First, you have to deal with both, but you deal with them separately, and the manner in which the applicant complies with the RH zoning is a separate question from how the applicant complies with Measure E.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry for
That's
such
all
a
right.
complicated question.
Take your time.
This one's hopefully more simple. On page 15 of the draft negative deck, we're talking about eucalyptus tree preservation. And it's identified as a historically significant piece of vegetation. And yet, if there is a city-approved arborist report that says that you can take those out, I'm not sure where the negative deck addresses the loss of that historical resource based upon a city determination by an arborist. I would think that if you have the potential to lose a historically significant resource, that would trip a significance threshold. But here it's something else is in play here.
Chair Larson, Commissioner Joseph, this was discussed heavily at the HLC hearing as well. And what was discussed at that hearing was that landscape features like eucalyptus trees that are historic are assumed to have a limited lifespan, and that their removal when that lifespan is over would not constitute a significant impact to historical resource. It's the nature of the resource. That is not to say they shouldn't be replaced by trees in kind that would replace that historical character, etc. And so when the HLC approved the historic structures report, they modified the report with a condition that required if they did need to be removed because the trees were diseased or otherwise had reached their lifespan, that they would need to be replaced by trees of similar size and canopy eventually. Obviously, you can't plant a huge tree and expect it to live right away, but
Thank you, Mr. Justice. I have a question, please. At the site, first of all, thank you for the great site visit. It was really, really good, and thanks for the ground cover or the mulching over the mud. It helped out very much for us late hikers on Thursday. My question has to do with the El Encanto Road. On the site map, I think it was on the site map, I saw that road, and it was interrupted, and I don't know, did it ever penetrate, or does it penetrate at all into the hotel site? It's a dead ender, right? Okay. Come up and answer, please, so it's on the record.
The record.
Thank you.
Chair Larson, this is El Encanto Road right here, and it does dead end at the property line.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and with that, we can move into comments. I would like to ask Mr. Cato, please, for today, since we're going into comments, the actions we're taking would be on the modifications to approve or deny, the development plan approval, is that correct? The TEDR, and the final mitigated negative declaration, correct?
That is correct.
Thanks. So having that in mind, commissioners, please, we'll start comments. And I see Commissioner Lodge has her light on, so will you lead us off, please?
We do have 7 different things we have to deal with. I can support 3, which is the modification to allow Mission Village and cottages 27 and 28 to encroach in the interior setback on the east side of the property. The immediately adjoining property owners seem to find that acceptable. I could support the modifications to provide less than the required distance between buildings. This is an interior issue for the project, and I don't have a problem with that. And I could support, at number 6, the development plan approval to allocate 7,021 square feet of non-residential square footage from the minor addition and small addition categories. I cannot support the first two modifications to allow the utility distribution facility and Mission. I can go along with the Mission Village on Mission Ridge Road, but not the utility distribution facility and surface parking lot to encroach into the front setback along Alvarado Place. There is a reason for the 30-foot setback. It is to make a resort hotel be more compatible with the residential neighborhood that it is in. Just because there was a parking lot there before or other uses doesn't mean that it's, in my mind, that it's appropriate to allow further modification or for modifications to continue. The eucalyptus trees are important, and I believe construction of this facility in such close proximity to the trees would negatively impact their life expectancy. The HLC says that the most important thing is maintaining the character of the property and the historic character. And in order to do that, I don't see how we can, or I cannot support that modification. In a letter from Suzanne Elledge, I believe, dated 30th January 2009, in reference to the operations and utility distribution facility and valet parking, it says the program changes are critical to the successful operation of the hotel by creating a more pleasant experience for guests, by relocating hotel operations to a portion of the property more suited for these types of activities versus the carrying out of these activities in the main building or off-site. Well, they're making it more pleasant for the guests, but they're making it less pleasant for the residents. The residents live there as long as they live in the property. The guests come and go. And I simply cannot support that modification. Number 7 is the transfer of existing development rights of 10,000 square feet. I wasn't on the council when the TDR ordinance was adopted, but in discussions before that, it was never the intent to take square footage from an industrial zone and put it in a residential area. And it seems completely contrary to what was in mind, or at least what was in the discussion at the time. And so I cannot support that.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Lodge. Mr. Justice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have been supportive of getting this project through the process so we can get the El Encanto back up and running and serving its very special function in the community. And I understand this process fragmentation is a difficult thing, particularly for the applicant to inherit from the previously approved plan. I'll organize my comments kind of along the findings piece, and starting with the final mitigated negative declaration. I took a look through Mr. Chitillo's letter and the 200-plus pages that he submitted and are included on the website. I'm surprised we didn't exceed our memory allotment. It certainly exceeded mine. But nonetheless, I think Mr. Chitillo raises a relevant and important point in his argument that he has, in fact, made a fair argument and there are disagreements among experts. And as a result, and having just come back from the CEQA and Land Use Law Conference in Los Angeles, they harped on this issue of a fair argument and the low threshold piece and highlighted a whole series of cases that had happened this past year. And I'm worried about placing the hotel in a La Entrada situation where the city approves a negative deck. The project goes forward, the CEQA process gets litigated, and have to go back and do this whole thing over again. I think it's far more prudent to take the EIR process, given the current design of the project. Now, I think we might be able to avoid that process and the time and costs it entails if there were some design recommendations that were integrated in the project to reduce some of the problems that are causing some of the environmental impacts that Mr. Chitillo refers to. And I think that would include relocating the utility distribution facility further to the south. It's currently located on the extreme north of this northwest portion of the property. And I've not seen any information that would dissuade me from thinking that that might be, there are other locations which would have less impacts on the neighborhood. You might switch around maybe one single-story unit where that current facility is proposed on top of the garage. So I cannot make the findings that the negative deck is appropriate at this point in time. On the modifications, I was interested in Mr. Vincent's interpretation of necessity. I have a different view of things and believe that there is a dual finding of both necessity and of appropriateness. And I believe that there are other locations for particularly the back of house facility in areas that will not cause the same impacts or externalities to the adjoining neighborhood. The next findings are the development plan findings, and we've got to make a finding number 2 regarding sound community planning. And while this project has many, many aspects of it that do represent sound community planning, I think Mrs. Lodge referred to the relocation of more intense non-residential square footage into an area that is largely, not exclusively, residential. And I think that raises some sound community planning issues. And the next one has to do with the development plan finding number 2 in an RH zone. And it says the proposed development meets the intent of the RH zone district by ensuring the least possible conflict with or disturbance of the amenities attached to or associated with the adjoining residential uses. And I think, again, the location of these particular facilities in the Northwest caused me concern, and I don't have the comfort level to be able to make that finding. So those 3 issues, I think, could be resolved by a redesign, but as currently proposed to us, I can't support the project because of an inability to make those findings, and that inability is based on a lack of a demonstration of necessity.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I do hearken back to the comment that was made earlier about an airport. I mean, the El Encanto has been there for 90 years. It predates, most of the structures that are around it. And I think people should cherish it for what it is, and we should welcome it back and do whatever we can to encourage it, both for the public benefit aspect of the project and for the economic benefit to the city. With that being said, the setbacks that everybody is talking about came into being long after this project was built. Most of the project is in the setbacks because the setbacks came later. So as I look even at the diagram that's on the board right now, those are all the buildings that were removed out of the setback. What's being put back in its place is the small upper structure for the exhaust portion of the underground distribution facility. Actually, I think that above-grade structure serves the purpose that nobody has talked about here today, and that is the surface parking lot that is directly to the south of it is depressed even lower than the grade of the current parking lot, and that one-story building then buffers both sound and headlights from the activity in the parking lot to the neighbors who are at least 200 or 300 feet away. So actually, I think that upper baffling structure not only baffles the noise from the uses that are subterranean by as much as 20 feet below grade, it also blocks headlights and sound from the valet parking lot. The other thing that I think is an improvement from the 2004 development plan is that surface parking lot has been lowered further into the grade, hidden behind the wall. It's also reduced in capacity, and the excess capacity that was removed has been moved into the Mission Village parking structure. So I think there's a lot of things that the applicant has done right in listening to the neighbors. It's too bad that we don't have, a little better resolve on that with everything that has gone on. But I do think that there are movements in the right direction. Also, most of the encroachments we're talking about are well below grade, and they're the same encroachments, in fact, perhaps even less so than the current parking lot that's approved in the 2004 master plan. I think the discussion on the TEDR, I understand that maybe, the transfer is coming from a different zone in town, but it is the mechanism that has been put in place. And in fact, I think we should at least applaud the applicant that all the transferred footage is subterranean. No one will see it. If other people in town did this, it might be a good idea. So I think it's a good way to handle it. It's not impacting the neighborhood, and it's an expensive way, but it certainly benefits the neighborhood. And I think people should at least recognize those efforts that the applicant is making. I think that the minor modifications in terms of interior yard setbacks and the distance between buildings are very much technical in nature, and I think they are to a much lesser extent encroachments than the old historical buildings, many of which are being replaced. So I think that even though there's a list of modifications, the amount of encroachment, I believe, is substantially less than the prior conditions. And I think in those areas, Landmarks was supportive, other than the UDF piece at the northwest corner. I think the project obviously did benefit from the lot merger in the past, so I'm not concerned about the amount of footage. I think the trail on that is clear, and that most of the footage is certainly accountable. And the 10,000 square feet is the legitimate current process that we have in place, and I don't think it would be fair to deny the applicant that ability, especially when it is being placed subterranean. And I can support the development plan findings, and I'd like to see this move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Next is Commissioner White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, like Mr. Jostes, I've been working with the hotel, or with the applicant and applicants, the generations of applicants, to in hopes of getting this project going sooner. And I feel like it's an amazing commitment that particularly Orient Express is making to continue forward today with a project in the face of what we see in this city or in this region as 3 other hotel facilities, we heard them mentioned earlier, that are frozen or in various states of disrepair and obviously wounding the region's economic life, as well as our general general way of life. So I feel very strongly that we need to tend to this application and try and make it go, if at all possible. I'm sorry that we are missing the buildings in the northwest area that were there before, because I think it might play a little better that okay, here's something there, we're going to put something back there. I think that people might not feel the same sense of encroachment as we do now, where it's open. How do you now we're returning to encroaching into that area. And obviously, it's the northwest corner. Well, I won't say obviously, because the point about the extra 10,000 square feet, I think those are the two issues that, to me, rise to the top of controversy and of focus and of concern in the environmental document. I wish that there weren't so many back of house activities going on, parking, laundry, etc., and the utility facility all happening in the northwest corner. I thought there was a good point made. Mr. Bartlett asked the question about where the houses are located. We do see, however, that there's really quite a goodly amount of physical setback from the facilities there. So I'm feeling less uncomfortable when I see that the setbacks are as large as they are from the other houses. So I'm interested in hearing what my other colleagues have to say. I think we've heard a really good, it's like the dog bone dialogue here between Mr. Bartlett and Mr. Justice and Ms. Lodge about the two viewpoints. I'm still sitting on the fence a little bit. I am concerned about the northwest corner, and I'm also concerned about this project moving forward. I know it's a great project, and I think that we're closer to there than I'm hearing Ms. Lodge and Mr. Justice talk about. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, and I look forward to hearing what my other colleagues have to say.
Thank you, Mr. White. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Chair Larson. I'll be joining Mr. White on the fence for the moment.
There's no room.
There's see how big that fence is. If we need a setback modification for it. I also want to see this project move forward, and I am hoping that there is some flexibility on the side of the applicant to see if some of these issues can be resolved so that it can go forward without appeals or further discussions that will basically slow down the process even more. So I hope we will be hearing something about flexibility. I'm just going to go down the list of modifications and talk about them. The modifications number 1 and 2, which are the northwest corner, I'm not convinced that those modifications are necessary and that they couldn't be that those facilities couldn't be arranged in such a way that the modifications wouldn't be necessary. And Mr. Justice indicated, well, what if it was moved south a little bit? The industrial strength central heating plant is problematic in proximity to houses. So looking at, as I get down to the development plan approval part on item number 6, this ties into that what we saw in 2004 was restoring an old building and reopening it quickly with the same kind of historic landscaping and historic landscaping groupings that had been there for so long. What we see on the ground today as the existing condition is substantially different. The rolling lawns are gone, the building is gone, and the industrial strength utility plant and laundry facility and so on are taking this project into a different kind of realm than what was originally anticipated in the master plan in 2004. I was on the commission at that time, and I remember we didn't spend much time looking at the on-site plan because the plan was to renovate what was there. And instead, the commissioners spent a lot of time walking around the site and thinking about the streetscapes and the pedestrian and circulation plans, even to the point of pondering a grand esplanade along La Swain Road where the old gaslight replicas are. And so the kind of considerations that we're making today weren't talked about in such depth because really it was about restoring an existing building. So what we're looking at today is substantially different in that it's a newer building that is replacing the historic building. The pool, the rolling lawns, those are gone. It's now terraced and proposed to be a fitness facility underground. And that northwest corner just continues to be an irritant to the residential neighborhood, and I wonder why there isn't more flexibility on that point in particular. So modification 1 and 2, I would ask that there be some consideration of doing it. What would you do if you couldn't get a modification? How would you put that, especially the utility plant, into function? Could it go into the understory of the main building, which is now much bigger than it was in the historic building? You have new space down there. Modification number 4, that's to allow cottages 27 and 28 to encroach. And I think those are the patios. And I support that modification in principle, but I would note that those patios include outdoor fireplaces, and I would want to see something from the fire department that those outdoor fireplaces directly under pine trees would be considered safe. The footprint of them I don't mind. It's the function that I'd like to be assured there's no safety issue there. And then we get down again to the development plan approval as defined within the RH zone standards. And the RH zone standards are not about industrial strength buildings. They're about things that are compatible with the neighborhood. And I'm not seeing that compatibility there right now. The extent of disruption of the site to date substantially exceeds the original plan, both in terms of topography and historic structure demolition. I know they were not designated historic structures, but they were eligible for that status. The landscape removal, it's important to consider that the trees along Alvarado, it's not just about the individual trees, it's the group of trees that are described in the report, and the group of trees and the streetscape along Alvarado. And that includes the request in the development plan to change the driveway entry. And I know the Historic Landmarks Commission is still not completely happy with how that has been proposed. So the streetscape plan along Alvarado is very noticeable. And then lastly, the valet parking lot use. The lot being sunken down and with a wall is better in terms of the sound from the valet parking lot. But again, it changes that streetscape quite dramatically in terms of having a large wall and a building on that corner, where before there was a sense of open space and landscaping. And any kind of mitigation that requires the valets or the owners of cars to turn off their alarms, I think, is unrealistic. If someone asked me to do that, if I was valet parking my car, I don't think I'd even know how to do it. And if I did and did it wrong, the alarm would go off. I'm living across the street from a construction site now where we have a lot of construction workers parking their car, and their alarms go off pretty much every day. Somebody's trying to open or close a door, and it doesn't go quite the way they expected, and it's not compatible with a residential neighborhood. So those are my concerns with this project, and yet the work that's been done and the commitment to the project on the part of the applicant is admirable. I look to my other commissioners to see where we might be able to go with this to move it forward, but I do have concerns about the two modifications and the development plan in the RH zone.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just listening to Commissioner Jacobs talk about car alarms, the thought popped into my head, does anybody do anything when a car alarm goes off? Does anybody call the police or do anything? It just adds to the general noise pollution, car alarms. Anyway, as far as the findings that we have to make, the mitigated negative declaration, unlike Mr. Justice, I believe that the record supports it. He may have a little more information about very recent changes in the interpretation of CEQA and so forth than I do, but I would support the final mitigated negative dec. Now, the other issues, and Madam Chair, I would suggest, since there are quite a few issues, that we not take it all in one lump, that we maybe
Some straw votes.
take the environmental document, the mods, the development plans, and the TEDR as separate items, because there may be a totally different vote on each one of those. The modifications, I think you pretty well got from my question before. I don't see the support in the record in the staff report that supports the proposed modifications along Mission Ridge and Alvarado for the utility distribution plant are supported. And so for that reason, I would not support those two modifications. The encroachment of the Mission Village buildings into Mission Ridge is a less intense use, and it's certainly a different flavor than the utility distribution site. So that one, I think, is supportable, as are the minor encroachments of the buildings 27 and 28. The development plan approval, I have the same problem that Mr. Justice had, in that we're required to make a finding that the project has been designed to minimize the impact on its residential neighbors. And as I just said, I haven't seen that that is true. Transfer of existing development rights, while Commissioner Lodge is probably correct that it wasn't anticipated to transfer from the manufacturing zone. In fact, though, that's the way it is, and I believe this complies, so I would support the transfer of existing development rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I neglected to speak to the negative declaration, and I just want to say that I concur with Mr. Justice's remarks. I also could envisage another La Entrada situation arising out of that. Another comment, this must all be rather bitter to the applicant, because it was HLC that directed them to work for another solution to the problem, but of how the individual units or cottages are heated and cooled. However, I don't think this is an appropriate solution, what they've arrived at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also am troubled by the northwest corner. I think the Tandem Valley parking lot, when I looked at the plans and saw the tandem parking, and I thought, well, to get at the back car, you have to move the front car. It's actually the parking lot has X amount of spaces, but it has an increased intensity of use. So that was my concern. It's not that you would have the opportunity for one car to have one alarm go off or whatever noise it would make, starting the engine, whatever. But it could be doubled, because to get at the back car, you have to move the front car. So I just looked at that as just being an extra, as being a little extra, a lot more detrimental to the neighborhood than I had originally thought when I was just looking at it on site. And I thought, oh, this is a lot more intense use, actually, by a half or a third. So I too am concerned. I think the way we should do this is, and I also thought if it stayed there, we might consider it like a focused EIR. I think that that's something that is used in these cases. I recall we did it. I can't remember what the case was, but I remember we did ask for a focused EIR on another big project. I just cannot recall which one it was. Which one?
It's sorry, Chair Larson. It's we've done it on multiple projects.
Yeah.
Sandman Inn would be an example.
Exactly, but I was thinking for traffic and for noise. I made a little short list. Traffic, noise. Sorry, what did you say? Yeah, Whole Foods was another one. Focused EIR. So but I thought about traffic, noise, air quality being a concern. And, you know, I have to say this about the noise. I mean, we all know that I live on the Mesa, and when the sundowners blow, I can hear a concert at the Bowl. I happen to enjoy that. But I'll hear it, or the marching band at Santa Barbara High, you know, and this is on the Alta Mesa, and I can hear it from clear across. So I know that sound's going to travel when the wind blows from the sea. Anyway, so I think what we should do is a series of straw votes, and we'll work our way through this. And
Madam
maybe,
Chair?
yes, Mr. Vincent.
Before we begin into the voting, I do want to make a couple comments regarding statements that the commissioners have made about the CEQA process and the CEQA document.
Yes, sir.
And also whether an EIR is required or appropriate. The standard is for the preparation of an EIR is whether there is substantial evidence of a significant adverse impact on the environment. It's not because we want to look at it. It's not because we think there might be an impact and we want to make sure. There has to be substantial evidence in the record of a significant adverse impact on the environment. That is the standard. Mr. Chitello's letter raises many points, and I am very familiar with the fair argument standard. Commissioner Joseph's probably heard several cases described about the fair argument standard as well. A couple of the points that Mr. Chitello's letter makes, and I believe that the commissioners were referring to those, specifically aesthetics and visual impacts. The CEQA cases look to design review in aesthetics. They recognize the role of design review in mitigating aesthetic impacts and find that even if there are negative comments or negative feelings about the outcome of the design review, that is not evidence of a significant impact. They look and rely on the design review to deal with the aesthetic improvements, and the MND relies on that to mitigate the aesthetic impacts of the proposed project. With respect to the view impacts, CEQA cases also, in fact, Mr. Chitello cites some of those cases, suggest that, and this is placed in the context that CEQA is an analysis of the environment in general, not of the environment of particular property owners, particular neighbors. And in the context of visual resources and visual impacts, CEQA recognizes that impacts on the views of a few neighbors does not generally amount to a significant impact. The very case that Mr. Chitello cites says that. So I understand that there's a lot of information, the hundreds of pages that he has put into the record. And I want you to understand that the document has been prepared in compliance with CEQA. If we have to get there, those arguments will be spelled out. But I want you to understand that staff has considered the materials that Mr. Chitello has put in the record, has considered the comments from the neighbors, and has prepared the document as appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent.
Madam Chair, could I just respond on the legal point? And I think maybe, Scott and I are not going to agree about the fair argument part, but the standard is whether there is evidence of a potentially significant impact. It doesn't have to be evidence of the impact of a potential impact. And at that point, the CEQA process is triggered. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. So should I go mod by mod or 1 and 2 together, do you think? I'm asking the commission. Some people are very experienced chairs here. So, Mr. Fell.
If I may.
You popped right up there. I guess you may. Everybody else is.
I don't know when I can talk or not talk.
Go for it 1 second.
Okay.
That's all you got. Ready?
What I'd like to ask for is it's 4:10 is to take a break so we can think about some of the things you've said.
Wait a minute, folks. We're asking for.
We started at 1 o'clock. And
Well, I could use a break for other purposes.
Okay.
So, speaking for myself, I would adore to have a break. So we'll stand recessed for, 10 minutes? Is that too much time? Okay, let's go 10 minutes.
Thank you.
I'll push the button. No.
Genius, of course, but keep that old horse before the cart. First you gotta have heart. Yes, you gotta have heart. Yes, you gotta have heart.
When Sunny gets blue, her eyes get gray and cloudy, then the rain begins to fall. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter, love is gone, so what can matter? No sweet lover man come to call. When Sunny gets blue, she breathes a sigh, sadness like the wind that stirs the trees, wind that starts the leaves to swaying like a violin, so playing weird and haunting melodies. People used to love to hear her laugh, see her smile. That's how she got her name. Since that sad affair, she's lost her smile, changed her style. Somehow she's just not the same. Memories will fade and pretty dreams will turn up where those other dreams fell through. So hurry, new love, hurry here and kiss away each little tear and hold her near when Sunny gets
only want what's the best thing for you, and the best thing for you would be me. I've been convinced after thinking it through that the best thing for you would be me. Every day to myself I say, point the way, what will it be? I ask myself, what's the best thing for you? And myself and I seem to agree that the best thing for you would be me. Yes, the best thing for you would be me. Yes, the best thing for you would be me. Every day to myself I say, point the way, what will it be? I ask myself, what's the best thing for you? And myself and I seem to agree that the best thing for you, yes, the best thing for you would be me.
Maybe I can't live to love you as long as I want to. Life isn't long enough, baby, but I can love you as long as I live. Maybe I can't give you diamonds and things like I want to, but I can promise you, baby, I'm gonna want to as long as I live. Now I never cared, but now I'm scared I might not live long enough. That's why I wear my rubbers when it rains and eat an apple every day. See the doctor anyway. What if I can't live to love you as long as I want to? Long as I promise you, baby, I'm gonna love you as long as I live. Wear long underwear when the winter breezes blow. I've got to take good care of me because a sneeze or two might mean the flu, and that would never, never do. What if I can't live to love you as long as I want to? Long as I promise you, baby, I love you as long as I live. As long as I live.
I love the way you're breaking my heart. It's terribly, 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 terribly thrilling. I love the way you're breaking my heart. Although you're gonna ruin it, it's heaven while you're doing it. I love the way I feel when we kiss. You're terribly, terribly, terribly irresistible. You sigh to me, you lie to me. You really know how it's gonna hurt tomorrow, but it feels so good now. So darling, just keep playing your part, 'cause I love the way you're
terribly, 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 terribly thrilling. Although you're gonna ruin it, it's heaven while you're doing it. I love the way I feel when we kiss. You're terribly, terribly, terribly irresistible. You sigh to me, you lie to me. You really know how it's gonna hurt tomorrow, but it feels so good now. So darling, just keep playing your part. Take your time and really finish the things that you start, 'cause I love the way you're breaking my heart.
I won't dance, don't ask me. I won't dance, don't ask me. I won't dance, madame, with you. My heart won't let my feet do things they should do. But you know what? You're lovely. So what? You're lovely, and oh, what you do to me. I'm like an ocean wave that's bumped on the shore. I feel so absolutely stumped on the floor. But when you dance, you're charming and you're gentle, especially when you do the continental. But this feeling isn't purely mental, for heaven rest us, I'm not asbestos, and that's why I won't dance. Why should I? I won't dance. How could I? I won't dance. Merci beaucoup. I know that music leads the way to romance. So if I hold you in my arms, I won't dance.
I won't dance, don't ask me. I won't dance, don't ask me. I won't dance, monsieur, with you. My heart won't let my feet do things they should do. You know what? You're handsome. You know what? So handsome. But oh, what you do to me. I'm like an ocean wave that's bumped on the shore. I feel so absolutely stuck on the floor. But when you dance, you're charming and you're gentle, especially when you do the continental. But this feeling isn't purely mental, for heaven rest us, I'm not asbestos, and that's why I won't dance. Why should I? I won't dance. How could I? I won't dance. Merci beaucoup. I know that music
such beautiful music.
For heaven rest us, I'm not asbestos.
I'm not asbestos. I won't dance. Don't ask me. I won't dance. Don't ask me. I won't dance.
Merci beaucoup.
Oh, merci beaucoup.
I know that music leads the way to romance. So if I hold you in my arms, I won't dance.
No, I won't dance.
I won't dance.
I won't dance.
Holding hands at midnight neath the starry skies. Nice work if you can get it, and you can get it if you try. Strolling with that one boy, sighing sigh after sigh. Nice work if you can get it, and you can get it if you try. Just imagine someone waiting at the cottage door, where two hearts become one, who could ask for anything more. Loving one who loves you and then taking that vow. Nice work if you can get it, and if you get it, won't you tell me how?
Right, we're going to ask. We're going to ask for a call to order, please. Okay, board members or commission members rather, and folks, please come back to order. Thanks for the break, everyone. I hope we all put it to good use. Oh, I see Mr. Fell is up there.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Fell.
If I could, and you've all had your chance to make your comments, and I'd like to make a couple of responses. Number one, the applicant is prepared to commit to move the UDF above grade element, above the ground element, outside of the setback, so no mod will be required. When I listen to the rest of the comments on parking, your good comments, but they were like we shouldn't have a parking lot there. I ask you to look at the approved plan. If we just walked away from the UDF, which we don't want to because it's an important element of the project, but if we just walked away and said, okay, we're not going to do the UDF anymore.
Excuse me, just
We're
for
not gonna
the
change-
benefit of the viewing audience, could you define UDF for everyone?
Oh, utility
Right.
distribution.
But folks at home need to know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. But otherwise, we could just take this surface parking lot with its already approved mods, and we could ask for no changes. And we'd have 54 parking spaces there. We'd be on the surface. I know a couple of people made comments that they didn't like the wall that was around the parking lot that reduced it down into the grade. Well, You know, it's funny, this is push me, pull you, because that is what HLC wanted. Not, we didn't get there on our own. We got there because HLC helped us get there. It's just difficult to talk about the fact that we've taken the northwest corner and that we've turned it into a big parking lot, and that, you know, gee, we're good guys, Orient Express is a good operator, but they're terrible people because they want to put all that parking in that corner. And I just say, hey, we weren't even here when this was approved. Orient Express didn't own the property. It was Mr. Frieden. And that was all approved. And we'll just figure out a way to go back and live with that. I just don't understand why we're so harsh on the parking in that corner, both because it's below grade, the UDF blocks the sound, the below grade blocks the sound, and hey, we can put 54 parking spaces right on the surface.
Thank you, Mr. Fell. I'll just ask this gingerly. Does anyone on the commission need to comment? You want to comment on anything at this time? Already commented. Good. Oh, wait a minute. It's looking good. Mr. Justice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this all comes down to the development plan approval in the RH zone, and when you intensify a use in an established neighborhood, I think you also need to adjust the project to equalize or reduce the adverse externalities that project causes on the neighborhood. And I think that Mr. Fell's suggestion to move this out of the setback speaks to that issue.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me, that would, I feel like with that I would be able to support the project. And so I think that I could go through the list of the findings. I'm concerned about sort of chewing on this thing in little bits. I think people need to sort of give us a sense of where they're going so that we can, if this project is going to be denied, then we can hear that, or going to be approved with conditions, then we go there. But I think that if we can do something with that utility distribution facility outside the setback, that's enough for me to lean toward approval, subject to going over the conditions.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, the mod to allow the utility distribution facility has gone away. Is that correct? But not the facility. Okay. All right. Okay. Ms. Lodge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not exactly clear just what Mr. Fell has said that they would do, that Orient Express would do.
All right. Okay, Mr. Fell?
We will relocate the UDF outside of the setback. We will not request a mod. The above grade portion of the UDF will move to the right. Let's see, to the east. And it will no longer be, you can see there's a pathway there. We'll move the pathway and we'll move that over to the right so that it no longer requires a modification.
Mr. White.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I wanted to comment to the parking lot. I think that for me, there's strong credence to the fact that it is an approved parking lot as is. And I think that it's better now being cut down lower into the grade than it was before. So that's the reason that I can support it, is that it's been approved already.
Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think this commission has already had other projects recently before it. I'm thinking of the 15 South Hope, where we had the subterranean parking garage encroaching into the front setback area below grade. So I think that the new structure that's under this parking lot encroaching, as long as it's covered with dirt and not visible to anybody, would be supportable in that same light. And if they're willing to move the above grade component, I think that's a great gesture, and we already have a parking lot, a much bigger parking lot, approved in this exact location. So I think that's a reasonable compromise, at least from my standpoint, and I do think the lowered grade on the lot is beneficial to the neighbors. So that would be my point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. All right, so the applicant has removed the need for the modification to allow the UDF to encroach into the setback, so we won't be taking an action on that today. But I will start with the development plan approval, please. And this is a straw vote, so everyone will be raising their hand and weighing in with their hand for or against, which would the RH standards, number 5, development plan approval as defined within the RH zone standards. That does include the findings of the mitigated draft.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I recommend that we start with the environmental document?
Okay.
You can't take any actions
All right.
without starting with the environmental document.
We'll start with the environmental document. Thank you, Mr. Vincent. All right. So this is to approve the environmental document.
Madam Chair, and we are doing this subject to the applicant's comments about the UDF.
Correct. Correct. So knowing that the modification has been removed, I would ask for a show of hands for all those in favor of approving the final mitigated negative deck loration. All those in favor? It's unanimous. It passes.
Making the findings in your staff report.
Making the findings of the staff report, correct. And then, and any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. So that passes. Yes, let's do that. Would someone care to make a motion for this? Do we need a motion with the straw vote? Straw vote is it. Okay. All right.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Justice.
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Thank you.
To make the findings to adopt the mitigated negative declaration. I think the changes in the project that have been offered by the applicant go the distance to resolve my concerns with the potential for significant effect and the need to do an EIR. And I think this is a good design change that pre-mitigates the problem. So
thank you, Mr.
So
Justice.
moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next would be the modification for the, excuse me? Oh, thank you. That's all right, chime in. I need it. Mission Village portion to encroach into the front setback along Mission Ridge Road. All those in favor of that modification, please signify by raising your hand. Any opposed?
Well, it's a double. We have the utility
excuse me.
distribution and then the Mission Village. So we're in favor of the Mission Village, and
Right.
not in favor of the utility distributions.
Well, I took that
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
Because we already voted on it, so I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't include it. So,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Justice.
Just in terms of expediency and moving forward, I think that given the changes to the project, some of our concerns that have been previously voiced have been resolved, and that we should just take the remaining modifications and development plan approvals as motions.
As motions, or can we put it in one?
As motions, or If you'd like to put it in a single motion,
I would-
that's fine, too.
I think it would be
we
expedient
don't
to
have
put
to
it
take
in-
two votes on
Correct.
each issue.
That would be great. So, Mr. Justice, now that you've worked this all out, how about a motion?
I would be happy to.
Thank you so much.
I move the Planning Commission make the appropriate findings to adopt the modifications referenced as number 3 and 4, and the development approvals referenced as number 5 and number 6, and to grant the transfer of existing development rights identified as item 7 under the required applications.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bartlett, second, and Mr. Cotto?
Yes, Madam Chair, we need to add in a portion of modification number 1 to allow the Mission Village to encroach into Mission Ridge Road. I didn't hear that in the motion.
That was intended.
Thank you.
And modification number 2 to allow the surface parking lot to encroach into the front setback, if that's the intention of the motion maker.
It is, yes. We would make those first two motions as modified.
Thank you. We'll let the record reflect that.
Madam
So,
Chair.
Before we call for a vote,
under discussion, Ms. Lodge.
My understanding was that this was not needed since they already have approval on that, on the surface parking lot. Is that correct? No?
Madam Chair, I would recommend that you consider those modifications because the design of the parking lot has changed. It's possible that the prior that everything's within the prior modification, but it's just going to be a lot easier if this application before you is acceptable to you to approve these modifications. It'll take out any question.
Thank you. Mr. Justice, are you on for a comment?
Yes, it was just to ask whether staff had any clarifying points regarding the conditions of approval. We haven't gotten to that piece, and I think that's an integral part of our decision.
And Ms. Jacobs has a question.
Regarding modification number 2, this is to approve encroachment into the front yard setback along Alvarado Place for the surface parking lot. My question for staff is, does the subterranean structure need any kind of encroachment modification? I know sometimes subterranean, when it tows in under a setback, it also needs a modification.
Madam Chair, the definition of setback is that it is unobstructed from the ground upward to the sky. If the UDF is completely subterranean, it will not need a modification. And so if the portion of the UDF that is in the setback is completely underground, it does not require a setback modification.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Where are we now? We've got a motion and a second. So I would...
If I could make a point of order, it seems we don't know really what you guys are thinking about because we don't have any revised plans or anything like that, and I don't know that you really do either. It would seem to me that having your conceptual motion fine, continue this so we can have a look at what's being proposed, and then we can alert you to whether we think that this is sufficient or not. We can't really respond to it. And I appreciate you've been very helpful in understanding of our concerns, but at this point it seems like we're dealing with only part of the information, and we need to have that before we can really respond to it.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Justice, you're the maker of the motion. Oh, thanks.
Well, I note that we, without revised plans, we don't have plans to stamp.
That's right.
So I would look to our city attorney for assistance in how to sequence this so that we do things in the proper order and get the proper assurances.
And Commissioner Lodge as well.
Madam Chair, if I could answer that question. You have a set of plans. The proposal before you is, I would say, as far as the plans are concerned, a relatively minor change in the plans. What you would do is make a notation of the change in that the plans are as presented with the change proposed by the applicant to move the above-ground portion of the UDF south or east out of the front setback on Mission Ridge and Alvarado. And that from that set of plans, the HLC will figure out the ultimate design layout. They're going to give you some confidence of this. HLC takes your plans and messes around with things to this degree all the time after it leaves this chamber. So I do not see any problem with this application going forward, and being approved with these plans with a notation of the accepting essentially the applicant's change to their proposal.
In order to make it technically and legally maybe a little even more solid, it is a change in the project description.
Actually, I'm sure that I'll need a paragraph from the city attorney if I have to write all this on the plans, just to make sure I do everything correctly. Sir, Ms.
Chair,
Lodge, thank you. Sorry.
Madam Chair, I still feel quite uncomfortable voting for this without something more concrete before me. And so I will be voting no.
Thank you. All right.
I'll call for the question.
Thank you. All those in favor of...
Aye.
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 And opposed?
Opposed.
Ms. Lodge? Anybody else? Thank you. You have a project.
Now, do we want to do anything on the conditions of approval?
Oh, yes. Conditions of approval.
Well, Madam Chair, the one area that I wanted to ask more about is the trees. I feel like we're I don't know whether I haven't seen an arborist report. There was not one presented, and as all know, I'm more in favor of the trees going away than staying. But I just didn't know whether we had more information to that effect. It sounds like they're more likely to stay than to go at this point. And
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Did the motion that was just voted on include the conditions of approval? Because if it did, we either need to reopen the decision, or because we don't change the conditions after you vote.
Well,
and
Madam Chair, we're still on the item, and we haven't moved on to the next item. And do we not have the ability to continue to talk about the item at this point as part of the project?
Madam Chair, what I would recommend, if we're going to make changes to the condition, then to the conditions of approval, I would recommend that you rescind the previous action and start over again, because the conditions of approval are inherent and integral to your consideration of all of the details of the project. And so if you need conditions of approval, changes to the conditions of approval, I recommend that you nullify your first action and retake your action, understanding the conditions that the project is being approved under.
Mr. Fell, one moment. Ms. Jacobs? Oh, you're not done?
I was actually I was going to say just what Mr. Vincent did, that if we need to reopen the question to do conditions.
Well, it's one. I don't need. I may not need to have it reopened at this point. I just want to ask about this tree issue, and that's one of the places that I'm concerned, and I turn to staff on that to understand better what the situation is. And there is no arborist report at this point. The trees will stay if possible, and will go if they're either diseased, a health and safety problem, or they can't stay as a result of the construction of the subterranean lot.
No, Madam Chair and Commissioner White, They need to stay unless they are determined to be diseased or have safety
Or health safety.
concerns.
So just those two
If
items.
they were impacted by the construction, it's the construction that would need to change, not the trees being removed.
Okay, thank you.
And that is
All right, well,
the
I'm
way
not
the
hearing the
mitigation
applicant
measure is
object to
written.
it, so we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Well, that's nice. Thank you. So we're back to, are you okay, Mr. Fell? I see you're packing, but I just want to make sure.
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Chatillo, we're there?
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Yes?
I believe we need to announce a 10-day appeal period.
Oh, yes, there is a 10-day, this decision is appealable to the city council within 10 days. Thank you very much. And with that, we have to do our administrative agenda. I almost adjourned us by mistake. I have to stamp the plans, though. This is the set I used.
No. Yeah, I'm sure we will. Is this better than the survey one? Better one is, yeah, that's the same. Yeah. It's the only thing that's really there. All right, well, see you, Melissa.
Welcome to, yes, you're welcome to have them. Oh, and if you can use this envelope over.
I'd like to, while I finish up this business, have maybe Commissioner Thompson, who's the vice chair, take over for a little bit and do the administrative agenda. Would that be all right with you? Thank you.
Okay, on the administrative agenda, committee and liaison reports, does anybody have any to present? Okay, hearing none.
Mr. Chair.
Review of the decisions of the
Mr.
staff
Chair.
hearing. Oops, excuse me.
Sorry, I just wanted to return back to Russell Ruiz's comments this morning, and basically I'm hearkening back to the Water Commission meeting of last Monday, that indeed the Commission has taken a stand on the desal and has circulated a document this morning that I asked you to review. And I haven't reviewed that document either, but I'm glad to report that at least that they followed our request to bring it to the full commission and have reported in. So I'll be looking at that, and next week I'll report back more specifically. Thank you.
Okay, any other committee and liaison reports? Lights. Okay, review of the decisions of the staff hearing officer. Do we have anything to go over on that?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. Nothing on the staff hearing officer. The item C, draft minutes and resolutions. Draft minutes of January 8th. Does anybody have any comments? What are you talking about? Okay, if nobody else has anything on the draft minutes of January 8th, I have a question for Mr. Cato. Between page 14 and page 15, the committee, Planning Commission liaison appointments, there seems to be a lot of them missing. Was that intentional to only show a few of them, or did we just somehow or another miss some of the liaisons?
That's a good question. I think that they should all be in here. We'll take another look at that.
So would you prefer that we continue the draft minutes till the next meeting so that you can see if that needs to be updated?
Yes, please.
Okay, could I have a motion to that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll continue the minutes of January 8th to look at that. And we have two resolutions from the January 8th meeting. Mr. Cato, would you like us to go ahead and review and approve those, or hold them to go with the minutes?
If you would review and approve those, I think that would be.
Does anybody have any corrections or comments on Resolution 001-09?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
On page 5 of the draft resolution, under item 8, traffic monitoring, the condition seems to be a little bit vague, and I would suggest that the second sentence should be augmented to read, annual reports documenting the actual traffic generation and modal split characteristics of the project shall be made to city staff, ... We're trying to get a handle on what the real world, on the ground impacts of this were, so we could input it into our evolving adaptive management process. And I think having that level of detail would help us to guide staff in getting the right information.
Okay. Did you get that wording, Mr. Cato?
I think we can get it off the tape. Oh, and yes, we'll be fine.
Any others for the that reso? Okay, Resolution 00209. None? How about Resolution 00309?
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. Commissioner Joseph's comment was on Resolution 00309. So, and we have that. Yes, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those three resolutions are approved. And Chairman's back, so anything else? Okay.
With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.